Hi, I am Jeff, and I'm joined today by Clara.
Hi.
Clara, you are a sociologist doctoral student. Am I getting that even remotely correct?
That's right. That's right. I
Okay.
study sociology.
All right. And I am submitting myself for inspection. I'm here to be inspected.
Well, I appreciate that. We've already gone over the informed consent, so you know what you signed up for.
I do. I'm not a lab rat, as you've said, because I've given consent, and lab rats can't give consent. So at least I'm not a lab rat.
Yes, not a lab rat. Thank you, Jeff. I feel so validated. Me when I'm talking.
Well, how do you want to start?
Well, I have this classic question now. I want to ask you, Jeff, what is your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Your ice cream breaker question. Got it.
That's it.
Well, some people have given simple answers from what I've seen, and some people have given complicated answers. So I don't know if mine is either simple or complicated. The simple version of my answer is vanilla. I liked vanilla, and I still do for a really long time. I guess when I was a little kid, I liked lime sherbet. People pronounce it sherbet, but that's not how it's spelled. So I'm always confused about that, for one.
Mm-hmm.
And then my actual current favorite flavor of ice cream, it has been for several years now, is something at Baskin Robbins. I don't know if they have Baskin Robbins in Ohio.
Oh, I've had Baskin Robbins before.
Yeah. There's this flavor called icing on the cake, and it's just like basically a birthday cake type ice cream, but it's got like, they call it a ribbon of like icing, like running through it. And I love like really sweet foods. So that's my favorite one, is icing on the cake from Baskin Robbins. It's held first place for probably about 10 years now.
Oh wow. Okay, that strikes me as like an era of your life, the Baskin Robbins icing on the cake flavor.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is there
You want to hear about that era? Is that what I'm sensing in your question?
I do. Like, I want to hear. Yeah. Tell me about the 10-year icing on the cake layer.
Well, let's see. It was shortly after I moved to a different part of the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, and so I was getting to know the new neighborhood. And I had shared custody of my kids at the time. They were kids at the time, and I had shared custody. They're both adults now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would. Our routine was I would get them on Saturday afternoon, and then I'd have them until like Wednesday morning. So that's how we split time with our kids for probably about this 10-year era. So right around that time, when I was first getting to know the new town that we were living in, we stopped at a Baskin Robbins that we saw. And I, of course, saw this particular ice cream flavor that I'd never heard of before. But I thought to myself, well, that sounds good. Let me try it. And then, the rest is history. That's the era. That's it right there.
I love it. Do you get that flavor to like mark special occasions or to like hang out with your kids? Is there something there, or do you just like ice cream?
Like I just like that particular ice cream. So if most of the time, whenever I'm passing by a Baskin Robbins, if I'm in the mood for ice cream and I feel like I have room for it, I haven't eaten too much for the day, then I'll try and go have some. I did find here recently, within like the last year and a half, there's a local ice cream place. It's called Handles. I don't know if they have some here in the DFW area. I don't know if they're anywhere else besides here, but they have like a birthday cake ice cream, and it's the closest thing that I've found of anybody else that rivals icing on the cake from Baskin Robbins. So sometimes they take my money away from Baskin Robbins.
Okay. That's great. Okay, so I had the benefit of sort of getting some of your conversation with BBK, some of your conversation with Cassidy, but I want to ask you now today where you stand. Would you call yourself a Christian?
Yeah, I still would. I still do.
Okay.
If asked, yes. If asked.
Would you say that you have any particular denominational label on that?
Personally, no. I am a member of a church within a denomination. And I think you saw from my conversation with Cassidy, I think it's entitled The Denominational Dilemma.
Yeah.
So I don't feel tied to any of those particular rooms, you know, to steal from C.S. Lewis's, you know, the I have been completely losing words for like the last month, but his
Yeah.
illustration in Mere Christianity about the hallway and the different rooms representing the different denominations of Christianity. I still don't feel comfortable ever just saying, well, yeah, this is me, this is my team, I'm stamped into this denomination, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any beef with anybody else in the other denominations, but this is me, this is where I am. So this is a church that I've ended up in. It's in the Wesleyan denomination, which is it's an offshoot, I want to say, of the United Methodist Church,
Mm-hmm.
and that happened like 100 years ago, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Wesleyan denomination actually got formed out of an offshoot, and I don't know my history of it very well. There's a lot of people who know it better than I that can correct me. But I think it was around like 1964 that the Wesleyan denomination was like officially formed, and it was like a combination of at least two offshoots from the United Methodist Church, or what was to be known as the United Methodist Church, after an initial split of some sort 100 years ago or so. And as I've been told, it had to do with like the issue of slavery. So yeah. I guess, I don't know. I haven't talked to people on the United Methodist Church side, but the people on the Wesleyan side say, well, we were on the side of anti-slavery. So
yeah. Well, it's interesting now, though. That's such a relevant sort of denominational question, because I would be interested if, you know, since the United Methodist Church recently schismed, and we have sort of the United Methodists, and then we have the Global Methodists.
Yeah.
Whether you're getting people from either side into your Wesleyan tradition.
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, no. We may have, but there's none that I'm aware of. I'm not like super dialed in at my church, you know, as to people who join. I'm a very bad member.
Yeah. No, well, I'm interested though in like why you would join a church. And you might have talked to Cassidy about that in my memories. It's just I watched a video a few weeks ago, but so I'm sorry, people tend to kind of mix up in my brain, and
no, it's fine.
Don't have all the notes in front of me right now, but because when I hear your kind of story a little bit, I do kind of wonder a little bit about that decision to join a Wesleyan church, to like actually join.
Yeah, I'm not a very intentional person. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I kind of just do things, to use church terms, as the Spirit leads. That's not typically something that I say, but just kind of off of feel. Like, what's the best way to describe it? It's not even like, oh, I'm getting a feeling that I should do this. It's not like that. It's just more of kind of like compulsions, basically. I'm just kind of going wherever the currents lead me, or wherever the winds blow. And so, oh, somebody's already left a comment. This is probably why people don't live stream. Oh, okay. Hello, Questarians. Yes, Spatch. Hello, Spatch. I see that often when Spatch is in the chat. What up, chat? I'm going to use some lingo that I'm stealing from my Gen Z kids. What up, chat? Vibe check. Anyway.
That was natural.
Where was I going? Oh, yeah. See, I have all kind. I'm undiagnosed ADHD. My wife is certain that I have ADHD. So yeah, it's easy. I can be easily distracted. So now that I'm paying attention to the fact that there are comments up there, I can easily be deterred. So have at it, 3 people who are watching right now. What was I going to say? Oh, so why did I join the church? Let's see if there's a slow or a fast version of this. So I mentioned that we moved to a new town shortly after. It was actually shortly after the divorce. I moved to make sure that I was still close to the kids, because that's where my ex-wife had moved to. So it's still here in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex, but it was probably about maybe half an hour from where I had lived before that. And I had just moved into this town, and one of my coworkers lived in this town as well. And so she had kids roughly the same age as mine. Her and her husband did. And she said, hey, we're going to this church. You should come one Sunday. So got invited. And so I've been going there ever since. That was like 2008. You know, my kids from that point on essentially grew up in that church. So it just felt like, you know, it was just kind of, I was just like, I'm here. I don't mind the place. there are some things that I like about it, so I'll stay. People seem nice. People are nice. People were nice then. They are nice now. And I just like, what's a good analogy for this? I can't really think of anything. I've heard it in work before. Some of the advice that you'll get whenever you when you're in a job, some of the advice that I heard from people was just like, 90% of doing a good job is just showing up, because so many people are inconsistent and don't show up. And the remaining 10%, you can do with what you will to, you can make yourself like really outstanding, or you can kind of just fly under the radar and everything will be just fine, until they ultimately decide that they need to, start cutting people. This is corporate America that I was getting this advice. Yeah. And so I think the analogy of that, to abstract that over to this church experience is, I just kept showing up, consistently, because it was just like, it was actually written into our divorce decree that I was the one that was responsible for the moral upbringing of our children.
Good, I remember that.
So, we made sure that the schedule had me having the kids every Sunday morning, so I would pick them up on Saturday afternoons. And so that's what we would do. So I would make it a point to like consistently go. At that time, it was just like, even if I didn't feel like it, I feel like I'm kind of obligated to do this at the very least in my divorce decree. It could have been anything. It didn't have to be church, but that was my version of fulfilling that obligation that was in there. Mm-hmm. And so, I just kept going and going and going. And at certain points in time, they would just come to me and they would say, "Hey, we need some help in this particular, ministry. Would you volunteer for this?" And I was like, "Okay, yeah, sure, I will." And they had this thing where it's just like, yeah, you don't even have to be a member. You can just be like a membership partner or something like that, is how I first got involved. And then at some stage they wanted me to be involved at a different level. And somewhere along the lines, I ended up like signing like a membership statement or something like that. I can't remember all of what it said, but there was nothing in there that I disagreed with at the time. And then I would say, what year are we about to finish right now? We're in 2024. In 2023, I had a discussion with the lead pastor and talked about, they were having a board seat that was coming open on their, it's not really a board of elders, but that's the closest equivalent that maybe people in church life would be familiar with.
Sure.
But it's like a board of administration. I'm completely blanking on what it's called. Something board of administration. Local board of administration, that's what it's called. That's how the polity within the Wesleyan church works. The individual churches are kind of responsible or anything, but they have to adhere to the Wesleyan book. There's a book of discipline. So as long as you're not violating anything in there, the church can make all of its own decisions about everything that's going on, with oversight from like, there's a district superintendent and all that kind of stuff. I really don't know a ton about it. It's just me going off of some things that I've heard. Sure. But anyway, I had a conversation with the head pastor about an open board position there. And so I ended up, submitting myself for nomination. And then our local church voted, on who would be on the next cycle of the board that was coming on. So I've been on that board now, serving currently in a 2-year term, which that term ends in June of 2025. So it just kind of all, I don't know, it felt more like it happened rather than me just saying, yes, I am fervent about something or some particular topic, and therefore I am intentionally stepping out and doing this. Although the conversation about joining the board was something where I felt like it was a little bit of a prompting that I got during, some prayer or meditation or something like that. It's just like, hey, maybe this is something that you could help with. So I put myself forward just to see what he thought. And he was like, it's really interesting that you're coming to me, because we're actually having a board seat open up, and we had no idea who we would think about, asking to maybe, put themselves up for to be nominated and then have the church vote on them. So that's a longer version of the story I was trying to tell, but hopefully that gives a little bit of an answer to your question.
It does, and it surprises me. It surprises me because I guess maybe in some of your earlier conversations, I kind of maybe heard some, what I would think of as kind of like uncertainty and vacillation about spirituality and religion and these things. And so I think there was one point I heard something like, and forgive me because it has been a while since I watched this.
No, it's fine.
Something like maybe you weren't going to go to a church for a while, or maybe you weren't going to practice religion. Am I remembering that right?
I could see how you would get that impression from the conversation. But no, I mean, it's never been on my radar ultimately to stop going to church. Like, I've never had really any serious thoughts about it. I do have temptations from time to time of, wow, what would it be like just to have my whole, I think Paul Vanderklay has talked about this before. I have my whole Sunday off, I can go to brunch. I can do things that quote unquote normal people do on Sundays.
Sure.
And there was a time in my life where I wasn't going to church pretty consistently. That was, I can't remember who I was talking to this about, if it was Paul or if it was Cassidy on one of their channels, but that was coming out of my teenage years and into my early to mid 20s, roughly. It was about a 7-year period, and then I think, yeah, I did stop going to church somewhere in the middle of my first marriage, and that was for a handful of months. And then when that relationship started to get rocky, that was the first place that I ran back to. Was, I need to go back to church. I need help. So no, to answer your question, no. Vacillation. I mean, there's a whole lot of ambiguity with me just around adherence to like doctrines or anything like that. I said ambiguity. Like I think I just have a difficult time because it's very easy for me to see the best case version of what everybody's making. So it's easy for, like, my default setting for just about everyone and every opinion that I run into is the steelman version of what it is that they're saying. It's very infrequently, like, this is a thing about me, is the better I know a person, the lower that setting gets to where I don't steelman them as well. It's just like, well, I know you a lot better, so I'm not giving you the charity that I would give to a stranger, which is a fault of mine. It's like, it would seem that if I were closer to you, my charity would increase. But this is a problem that I've recognized in myself, and I really don't know how to work on, but I know it's something that I need to work on, because typically I was talking to somebody the other day, and I was telling them, I said, yeah, I have this annoying habit that when somebody calls me to complain about another person or a situation that they're dealing with in life, is I immediately just default go to, well, maybe they had a good reason for that. Or I'm starting to defend the person that they're complaining about. And it's heavily annoying. It's highly annoying. My wife currently, it's something that I know annoys her, and I tried not to do it. It's just like, I don't know what happens to me, but whenever I'm closer to someone, for some reason, they get the version of me that's just like, well, let me try to help you, make peace with this other person. Maybe, I don't know.
What are you, like an Enneagram 9 or something, like a peacemaker?
Yes. Yep. I can see everyone's perspective perfectly at the same time. So I'm like a really good moderator. If I feel like I understand a conversation really well that's going on between two people, and I've done it in very brief snippets here on YouTube. Like I moderated a conversation once between, I believe it was Sam Tiedemann, okay. Transfigured channel.
Sure.
I'm sure you've seen him a little bit around these corners.
Terry and Sam.
Yes. It was him, and it was Father Eric, Catholic Father Eric.
Yeah.
And Jacob. That's right. It was these three. It's out there. So I think it's still out there somewhere. I'd have to go dig up the channel, because it was a contact that Jacob had. And I think Jacob asked me to moderate the conversation. So I moderated a conversation between a Catholic, of course, Trinitarian, a biblical Unitarian, and a Jewish gentleman. So it was interesting. So I was just asking questions, quote unquote, just asking questions. No, I was just asking questions. One of my questions was something that I asked to each of them. Is I said, what do you lose if the thing that you believe in most strongly isn't true?
Ooh.
And now I can't remember what anybody said. I was just so, over impressed with my question.
I like it.
But I want to get down to the core of it, right? Because people are very charged up about the things that they care about most. And, in a Jordan Peterson frame, these are referred to as axioms and that kind of thing. Well, what if your axiom isn't true? What happens? What would your life be like starting right now if in reality the thing that you believe most strongly in isn't true? And that's a difficult question to try to answer sometimes, especially when you're thinking about the things that you hold most dear, or the things that you're kind of, building the stability of your life on.
Sure.
Because things fall apart when what you're standing on isn't solid.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good segue into Jordan Peterson, and when you first, because I understand Jordan Peterson sort of, you got fed PVK from the Jordan Peterson kind of algorithm. Is that right?
Yes. Yeah. So I was watching Jordan Peterson's biblical series,
Okay.
and eventually
2016-ish, right when he sort of kicked off, or?
I would say it's probably around 2017. I
Okay.
think 2017, because I think I talked to Paul for the first time in 2018. So I'd been listening to some stuff in 2017. It was right off. Interestingly enough, they talk about how Peterson is kind of like for the directionless 20-year-olds guys out there, maybe they don't have a father figure and he becomes their father figure or whatever. Sure. And here I am, I'm aged here in the corner. I'm not the oldest person, but I'm 50. I'm 50. That's a SNL reference for people who don't know. Well, you can look it up. And so in 2017, of course, I wasn't a 20-something kid that didn't have any direction, but I was a 40-something kid that didn't have a whole lot of direction. And my father had just died that year. So shortly after, October of that year, I don't think that the guy was connected to any of the type of stuff. It wasn't Jordan Peterson that was appealing to me in any of the ways that maybe one of your archetypal, 20-somethings that were directionless and didn't man, I can't think, words are not coming to me, but didn't have like the drives in place or the things to go after and stuff like that. Right. I had started a family. I'd had a 20+ year career that I was still in, and, am still in to a certain extent. Like I've done like a career shift into a different domain, but still, gainfully employed, able to pay for things, able to, raise a family, that kind of stuff. Of course that went off the rails with a divorce, but still, I had recovered from that. I had gotten married, remarried. And so I started, the algorithm, because I was just like watching, Bible type stuff, like Bible Project material had made its way into one of the sermons at the church that I was going to. Like they used one of the Bible book descriptor videos to lead into, what the pastor was teaching on that day. And so I was like, oh, that's interesting. And so I went and found the Bible Project, and then I started listening to their podcast, and they made reference to a University of Toronto professor who was doing lectures about the Bible. And I eventually saw who it was that they were talking about. He was involved in some political stuff. And so I was like, I'm not interested in that. And then eventually, once I had a lot of windshield time, because we were taking a long trip down to the desert, Big Bend National Park, right on the border of Texas and Mexico. It's about a 10-hour drive from where I am. I decided just to start listening to his biblical lectures. And so that kind of hooked me, because he was just like presenting it in a different way than maybe I'd ever heard before. And one of the things that I told Paul was, started maybe about 15 or 16 years ago, I really started reading C.S. Lewis as I was like processing and walking through the end of my first marriage. Somebody had recommended his book, The Problem of Pain, to me. So I started reading that one, and then I started getting hooked on C.S. Lewis type stuff. And one of the things that I really liked about C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity and other places is he was able to like present things about Christianity in ways that I'd never thought about it before. And so it was just like interesting and fresh and new and exciting. And so when I started hearing some of the things that Peterson was saying, they were different, obviously, than what Lewis was saying about those things. But it was that same interesting way that he was putting it forward. It was like, innovative or at least new to me sounding. It's like I think YouTube has this filter that says new, and then it has another one that says new to you. So if these things weren't new, they were certainly new to me. And so I was like, wow, I never really heard, I haven't heard anybody talk about ideas in this way since my reading of C.S. Lewis. Now, that probably says a lot more about my, small scope of reading that I've done in my life. There are probably tons of people who are this amazing. I just haven't
I think
latched on
C.S. Lewis
to
is iconic.
And so I got that Lewisian quality. I sensed that in Jordan Peterson as well when he's talking about the in his Genesis series. So eventually the YouTube algorithm fed up Paul's conversation with Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you've had a chance to watch that one yet.
I don't think I've actually watched the whole thing.
Yeah, but he had about a 30-minute conversation back when Jordan Peterson was doing his, he was doing like
Patreon.
for Patreon subscribers at a certain level, each month he would, have, I don't know how many conversations he would have, but it was his paid version of Rando's conversations. And Paul, started doing those for free, which was kind of neat. And here recently, I don't know if anybody knows this, but Peterson sent out an email to a certain distribution list of his customers of certain products that he sold. I would assume that this is this email distribution, where back in early, I think his deadline was November 5th, but he was seeking people to basically, if any randos out there, he didn't use that term, but if anyone out there wanted to talk to Jordan Peterson about a problem or a life situation that they were facing, he was taking applicants. And so that may start showing up on his channel, where he's taking an old page from his playbook, but now I'm calling it he's taking a page from Paul Vanderklay's playbook, where he's going to be bringing, I don't know if he's going to be bringing them onto his channel or not, but it made it seem like he was. So he might be doing something like that.
Do you think that that's exploited? That sounds like Dr. Phil to me. That feels...
I mean, maybe. They did have a caveat in there that said something, we understand it could be of a sensitive nature. And so we might, we're willing to work with you around stuff like that. So it might be that if you don't feel comfortable sharing it, you might have a right to opt out in the agreement that you make. Now, I haven't seen any kind of agreement. I did consider filling out the application, but ultimately I shied away from it because it's I don't need million subscriber channels attention on myself. So I think I'm good. I gave it some thought and I was like, yeah, I mean, there's a certain level of, there are people on both sides that have their opinions about Jordan Peterson. And I'm not sure I want to be on that level of a platform. I'm fine with a 37 or a 30,000 member subscription level exposure on Paul's channel, but that's about as far as I'll probably go. that's high enough for me. But yeah, my conversation, I eventually reached out to Paul and had a conversation with him, and I was scared to death of going out on the internet and talking with someone on the internet at that time. I almost canceled the appointment. I almost didn't do it, but I ended up having the conversation with him. And my wife and I were both just oh my gosh, how many people are going to see this? Because at the time she was actually working in a church. She doesn't right now, but I think there was just some concern of, I don't know, just if something goes out there on the internet and they can tie her back to me and some of the things that I'm dealing with. We didn't, I honestly to date don't think it would cause any problems whatsoever, but you're just sensitive to stuff like that when you first step out here onto this ledge and you've never done it before. I'm not a veteran or anything, but that fear of of doing that has kind of left me, at least for now, but not on the very big platforms. I could see how that could sound a little bit contradictory, but yeah, I do still have a fear of being out there and being in front of the entire world, even though technically the internet can be the entire world. It just depends on what kind of attention it gets. And so there's one final point that I wanted to make there, but I couldn't remember what it was. But yeah, the only other thing is, I think the most views, the highest view count of any video that Paul had put out at that point on his channel was 3,000. Yeah. And so I was like, okay, we can live with that. There's no way it's going to get that high. And even to this day, I don't think it's even reached that level. So it's been good.
Okay. So there is kind of like I don't want to say hiding, but there is kind of a kind of blending in.
Well, yeah, yeah, and I think that's a little bit of the ethos of what's become known as this little corner. I mean, when I first got involved, it didn't have a name, wasn't being called that. You know, some people who were involved in the space early on, you know, don't still consider themselves a part of TLC, but they're still a part of this sphere. And what was I going to say? That's kind of the ethos of a lot of this little corner faction. I don't know if faction's the right word, but I'll
Sure.
say circle, where, yeah, we don't want all of this to get noticed. We don't want it to blow up. If it's going to grow, just let it grow organically. We don't need anything to go viral or anything like that. At least I think that's kind of an unspoken desire is maybe too strong of a word, but just, yeah, if we had our preference between one or the other, we would rather not have, you know, something that gets the attention of like a million people or something like that, and then it just explode. No, there are some people who are like, no, that's what we need, because we want to be able to bring in as many people as possible, because this is a good thing. We need to bring in more people. But I think I'm more on the side of, no, slow growth is good, and if this is what people need, they're going to find their way to it. And of course, I think there's going to be a signal boost after the Chicago mid-Westuary event, you know, that Chad and Sam and Neil and a handful of other people that I'm forgetting are putting on.
Yeah. I want to ask more about estuary conferences, but I want to get back to what you were saying a second ago. Yeah, I can't even read my own handwriting. This is terrible. There's something down, and I was like, there were two. Okay. There was two sort of things behind your thinking, and one of them was privacy.
Yeah.
But another one was growth. Growth, and so I guess I kind of wanted to sort of try to follow track your thinking there about those two reasons, two sort of things that keep some people out of this little corner, or people want to like moderate the growth of this little corner. And one of the first thing that it sounded like you were talking about there was privacy, like because the more people that come into this, the more it could sort of increase the viewer count. I'm guessing.
Yeah, so two different, yeah, I kind of shifted into a different topic. The privacy part was more just like on the personal level, right?
Sure.
I think a lot of people that engage in this corner, at least the people that I've been closest to, try to shield their families just a little bit, especially, you know, because it's common amongst a decent amount of, you know, people who are, at least if you call it wave one of this whole thing, where our spouses are not interested in any of this stuff. Like, it's part of the reason that we got so heavily involved is because we didn't really have anybody it felt like in our personal lives that would be interested in this, don't have the time, the logged time of all the videos and stuff that you've listened to that kind of led you into this. You know, a lot of that was, for many of us, like Peterson conversations, for at least the Peterson funnel, and things related to that. And then of course, Paul's content. It's like, there's a small enough segment of people in real life that even know who Jordan Peterson is or even pay attention to him. And, you know, he's got like millions of followers. Okay. But then the number of people who even know who Paul Vanderklay is, it's even, you know, it's levels of magnitude smaller than that. And if nobody who in my walking around life knows who Jordan Peterson is, then there's no way that they will have been listening and understand the things, you know, that I find interesting or appealing about what Paul puts on his channel. And so that was something, you know, that we had in our personal lives too, where it's just like, yeah, my wife's not interested in this stuff. My kids aren't interested in it. But I have found people who are. And so, you know, I don't want anything, you know, like spilling over into my family life that could be like, when you're on the internet, there's a small group of people here in this sphere that watch this kind of content, that would watch something on Randos United, or watch something on the Friday Morning Nameless, or would watch something on Grim Grizz's channel, or watch something on Paul's channel, or some of the other adjacent channels that I'm forgetting. But then, you know, there's the internet is like so much larger than that group of people. And, some people outside of it, it's gotten their attention. I think when there was like the Chino event, there were some people who got some eyes on what was going on here because they were paying more attention to some of the higher status people who are, involved with Paul a little bit, like your Jonathan Pageau and your John Vervaeke, and of course your Jordan Peterson. And so then, I think there was like a group of guys, I forget the name of their podcast, who became aware after Chino of like the estuary concept. And they did like a little mock or parody podcast version of what an estuary meeting would be like. And I think the tone of their satire was just like, oh, it's a bunch of people smelling their own farts and not really not really doing anything or making a difference in the world. They want to be able to talk about the things that they want to talk about and not have their ideas challenged and just have people agree with them no matter how stupid their ideas are. It's kind of the general gist that I was getting from, what they were saying. And I think that's all well and good. People can have their opinions and, make fun of whatever they want. So that's fine. I don't have an issue with that. But the point is, I think for me, at least, I don't want to speak for anything else. There was just some kind of fear that being out there on the internet, if something, as I was alluding to before, goes viral, it's bad enough if it's something bad, it like comes down on the individual that's involved with it. But then if that expands to your family, like it's even worse. So it's something that you're wary of and you want to try to protect against as best you can. But I do wonder sometimes about, how much of that is controllable. Like if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. If you're dipping your toe into the internet pool, there's no guarantees that something like that won't happen no matter what. But, you try to safeguard as much as you can against things like that. So that's basically it.
Well, and I was intrigued that you asked your children as well, like, what did they think about this going on?
Yeah, well, I mean, they're more culturally and online savvy than I am, even going back back to 10 years ago. And so I wanted to ask them because I didn't really have a good idea of, well, if I'm putting myself on the internet, is this something that's going to go viral and it's going to embarrass you guys? It's going to embarrass me. If you think it will, then I don't want to put it out there. And, they reassured me after they watched, they're like, no, this is good, Dad. I think this could be really helpful. Like this was really helpful for me to watch. So once I heard that and, my wife and I talked about it and we both said, yeah, let's go ahead and put it out there. Then that was it. I wasn't worried about it after that. And it was a really good decision for me because it unlocked a lot of new relationships for me in this corner where I didn't have them before.
Oh, okay. Tell me more about that. I do want to hear more about that. People like,
yeah. So I want to say it was 2018, sometime around March of 2018 that I had my first conversation with Paul on his channel and it got posted. And like within maybe 10 minutes of it getting posted on his channel, Paul sent me an email that said, hey, there's somebody that wants to talk to you. And of course it was Luke Thompson. So Luke Thompson and I started corresponding back and forth, and he got me onto an app that I don't think he uses anymore, but at the time he was using it quite a bit because it's easier for him to interact by voice rather than by text, called Voxer. And so it was a place where you could leave voice messages. It was before, some of the more common apps now, like iMessage, let you leave a voice message. I think I don't often use it. But it was just it was an easier way for him to communicate back and forth. So we started having, back and forth walkie-talkie conversations there. And also around the same time in the comments section of my first conversation with Paul, another guy reached out to me who had been on Paul's channel several times at that point, Job from the Netherlands.
Okay. Yeah.
So Job, if people don't know, is who, I've referred to him as the archetypical Peterson to Paul Vanderklay to Jesus pipeline. Because Job, and you can see Job's story. I think there's like 5 main videos that are just conversations back and forth between Job and Paul on Paul's channel. He has a playlist. And Job, he tells his story on there, but essentially he was an atheist. He found Peterson. Peterson really started to help lift him out of depression that he was in. And there's a really interesting, I'm sorry, here's my ADHD. There's a really interesting conversation that Paul gave, maybe 2017, maybe 2018, at the C.S. Lewis Society of California. I think you can find this on Paul's channel if you go deep into the archives.
Okay.
And Paul, I think, was invited there to talk about the commonalities between Jordan Peterson and C.S. Lewis, or some things about C.S. Lewis and about Jordan Peterson's work that maybe connect on levels of how they're reaching people, maybe comparing and contrasting things. And Paul even references Job in that conversation as like an archetypical example of the types of people that Peterson was helped making a difference in their lives. So anyway, back to what got me on the topic of Job in the first place is he reached out in the comments section of Paul's and my conversation. And he's from the Netherlands, and he says, hey, I'm actually going to be in Texas in a couple of months. We should meet up. And so we connected through Paul to get each other's email. And Job was in Texas for a conference in Austin, which is about a 4-hour drive from me. Job, jokingly said later, I didn't realize Texas was this big. I didn't know how big of a commitment you were making, like, to come see me. And I was like, no, it's no big deal. I actually had the week off because I was transitioning between jobs. So I took a day out to go hang out with him on a Thursday. And we met up in Austin, Texas. I actually got a rental car to go down there because I didn't want to put like the extra miles on my car at the time. And I went and picked him up from a university down there, not the University of Texas. I can't remember which one it was, but I picked him up. And it was kind of like an Uber driver situation, but you don't get to check or verify anything. Like, is this the right license plate or anything like that? And so, I roll up and he's standing there. And of course, we've seen each other on Paul's channel, so we can say, okay, yeah, this is the guy. And he gets in, and we're just kind of joking together about like what our wives think about this. And he's just like, yeah, I can't remember exactly what the tenor of the conversation or the particulars of the conversation were, but it was something like, so how do you know that you're not getting in the car with an axe murderer? It's just like, well, we say, I don't, but I've seen this guy on the internet. So there's that.
C.S. Lewis. Totally.
Yeah. And at the time, I don't know that Job had read much C.S. Lewis at that point. So,
wait, are you responsible for introducing Job to C.S. Lewis, or?
I don't think so. I think Job was aware of C.S. Lewis. But yeah, he did read C.S. Lewis, not through his process. I know he read Mere Christianity, and me and him and Luke at least had a conversation talking about some of what he had been reading there. But yeah, and then me and him and Luke later on did a handful of videos on the Randos United channel about where we were reading through C.S. Lewis's A Grief Observed, where he was basically keeping a diary of processing his wife's death. And it wasn't originally intended for publication, which is interesting. So it's very raw. If you haven't read that before and you're dealing with loss, I would highly, highly recommend it because there's a lot in there that's helpful. So anyway, we meet up, we have lunch. Actually, I can share this because I pulled up some archival stuff because part of you and me connecting was me saying, hey, if you want any background or some history on this whole community and the first inklings of how it formed, I can share that. Let me see if I can share my screen. This is my first time ever live streaming directly on StreamYard. So forgive me. Let me see how I can make this work. There's a present button here. Let's see. Okay, good. It's letting me pick the screen that I want to share. Yeah, so this is me. Here we go. Let's see if you can see this.
Oh, yeah.
So this is me and Job at the Salt Lick Barbecue, just outside of Austin, Texas.
Okay. Is there a date on that?
That is dated May 16th, 2019.
Okay.
So actually, it was 2019 that I talked to Paul. Okay. Yeah, it was in March of 2019. All right, I'm getting my years mixed up.
Okay. You look like you're having just a grand old time there.
Yeah, it was fun. And my second conversation with Paul, I talk a little bit about what the content of some of this conversation was. So you can go check that out.
I was like, the meeting is definitely familiar, but
yeah.
okay, wait.
And then here's Paul leaving a comment.
That's funny.
And that's about it. So yeah, there's a little bit of history. As far as I know, this was the first meetup between people who had found each other through Paul Vanderklay's channel. This was the first in real life meetup, as far as I know. Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay, I have a funny story that transcends time about the same time because someone I knew in 2019 who I had lunch with at the Notre Dame cafeteria, a friend of mine, told me we had conversations like this. And then I went on to find out recently that that person had a rando around that time with PBK. So
Oh, wow.
just kind of a small transcending history world. So
I'm going to share another fun fact here. But I was curious who it was because I may have seen it. I was watching like everything with religious. Like I said, I can't think of words now. I was doing it religiously. That's the word I'm looking for.
Religiously, yes.
Consistently.
Yeah, we should talk about that because that would be like a fun connection.
Yeah, fun fact about this. I'm going to share this. The Randos United. Now I know a lot of people who are watching this have no idea who Randos United are now. That's so Wave One.
Okay, Randos United, Wave One.
But the Randos United channel logo, if you zoom in on it, it's like at that point when I was designing it, it was all the people who had a conversation with Paul Vanderklay on his channel. So you've got him and Freddie right here as the first one. And then you've got Paul, and you might be able to make out who some of these people are. But if you go back and look on his channel, you'll be able to find each one of these conversations. This right here is Julian. Julian's a Hutterite that lives up in or near Manitoba, Canada, if I remember right. And he was early on, had a few conversations with Paul. And he recently had a conversation with Paul that didn't make it onto the main channel, but was behind the members only. No, it wasn't. There was just a link that Julian would share with you if you asked him and he felt comfortable. But anyway, that's what this is. Let me see if I can point out some of the names. You might be able to see them right here. Let me see if I can see any more. This lady right here has left this plane. She's since passed away. That's Mary Cohen. She was a Jehovah's Witness turned Catholic. She actually was able to point me in the direction of some cool C.S. Lewis content that was out online. So I'm very thankful to her for that. This guy is a guy named Rod Hugan. This is one of Paul Vanderklay's really good friends. He's a pastor, I want to say in Arizona. Mm-hmm. He's like 700 feet tall. Like he's taller than Paul. And Paul is really tall. Paul is maybe 6'5", 6'6", something like that. Let me see if there's any others that just stand out. Those are more like people from the early days. I swear that Luke is on here somewhere, but maybe not. I don't know why he wouldn't be on here. Yeah, here's Luke. There's Luke right there. Okay. Yeah. And these are also in the order that people talk to him. So yeah, right here is Cassidy. Okay. And then I was the next person that got posted after Cassidy as far as a Randos conversation is concerned. So that's me from our first conversation. And then there's Luke. So the three of us in a row, one after the other, got released on Paul's channel. So anyway, that's it. There you go. There's a little bit of lore for you.
Yes, that's really cool. Okay, so you were watching Paul talk to people one at a time. Mm-hmm. I guess as they decided they wanted to sign up for a slot with him. Was he always doing it this way with the slots?
Yeah, I mean, basically, like he was doing his content where he was commenting on Jordan Peterson and Paul. The way that he tells it is, he just wanted to have some conversation partners. I mean, he had the same problem, that all of us had. He was like the first one. It was like, we can't talk to anybody about any of this stuff. Nobody's either going to know what I'm talking about or be interested. So who can I talk to about this? So he just started putting his thoughts and his comments on Peterson material out there on his channel. And then people, after watching his content, started reaching out to him, said, hey, I can't talk to anybody either. Can I talk to you? So he started having these conversations, and then he thought that they could be helpful. He thought that they could really be helpful to people. So he's decided to start asking, hey, is it okay if I record our conversation? And if you don't want to do anything with it, I won't release it. But if you and I both agree that it would be helpful, I'll put it out on my channel. And so that's how that got started.
Okay, but you come in to the picture.
Mm-hmm.
And you tell me more.
Well, about what part? Like how I came into why I came into the picture, or what happened after I came into the picture?
Yeah, well, I know you attributed the term rando to Cassidy, but you started asking people to do randos with each other, with you, with.
Oh, no. So yeah, so randos. Let's see. Cassidy, in her first conversation with Paul, she was just fascinated that he would have random people from the internet come onto his channel and just talk to them. Like this seemed like a novelty to her, and I think for the most part it was. And so she said, yeah, I just think it's wild that you talk to randos on the internet. And so that term like stuck in my head.
Yeah.
So I had this inkling that, oh my gosh, I want to talk to all of these people, you know, so maybe I'll set up a YouTube channel where I could do that. And then I never did anything with it. Right. It was just like this intonation. I don't know what the right word is, but I just got kind of it's that current that pushes me in a direction, you know, it's just kind of that compulsion. And I was just like, oh, well, let me create a YouTube channel. And then I'm like, well, what am I going to call it? I was just like, I know, I'll call it Randos United. I'll steal that term from Cassidy, who I've never met or talked to before. So I'll just do that. And so then I just let it sat there for months and months. I didn't do anything with it. And then after that, I met Job and I met Luke, and we started having conversations with each other that we weren't recording. Like we weren't putting anything up online. We didn't know of a place to do it. And because as I talked to Paul about it, I was like, well, it doesn't seem to make sense if we're having conversations with each other that we would reach out to Paul and say, hey, Paul, put this up on your channel. It just didn't seem like it would make sense. Yeah. And so
Discord, this was on BOM?
No, BOM didn't exist yet.
Okay.
So the Bridges of Meaning Discord wasn't in play at that point. The only way we could talk to each other was through Paul, right? We would either have to put our email address in the actual comments section, which that's kind of fraught. Do you want everybody emailing you?
Yeah.
But more often than not, we would just reach out to Paul and we'd say, hey, this person that you talked to on your channel, can you give them my contact info and share theirs with me if they're okay with it? And so that's how we first started connecting with each other. So Job and Luke and I started having conversations on Zoom with one another, and we weren't recording them. We were just talking to each other. It's just like, oh my gosh, yeah, what do you want to talk about? And we would talk about things. And then we finally got brave enough to like hit that little record button. So we would record some conversations, but then we'd be like, oh no, the stuff that we've talked about, we can't release this on the internet.
Okay.
And it was more just personal stuff. It wasn't because it was like spicy or like, oh, this is going to get a bunch of attention or something like that. It's just like, no, I think this is too personal. This is more personal than what I want to share out there. Yeah. And then finally, we decided that we were going to read A Grief Observed together. So we recorded that. And I think that's the first quote unquote randos conversation between just people who were talking to one another that got posted on this channel. But there was one right before that where the three of us, me and Luke and Job, had a conversation with Paul on his channel. So all of us together. I think it was the first time that anybody who was like from Paul's internet audience had ever come together on Paul's channel. So I think that was like a first time too. That's the first video. If you go back to the oldest video on Randos United, it's also on Paul's channel, but it's the first time that that I'm aware of that anybody from Paul's audience had gotten together with one another and also with Paul on his channel. So these are kind of some of the milestones that I remember.
Yeah.
But your question was, so Randos United, that's kind of how the channel got formed. So we had that recorded conversation reading Lewis's A Grief Observed, just like the first few passages from it. And then, just sharing what struck us about it. And then I recorded it, and then we're just like, what are we going to do with this recording? And I had told them that I had created a channel, and that was just like in passing in some earlier conversations. And Joe was like, put it up on Randos United. And I'm like, oh, okay. It just didn't dawn on me to do something like that. I don't know why, because I think I was never brave enough to like reach out to people and just say, hey, I saw you on Paul's channel. I want to talk to you. And I also want to put it on my channel. Because at the time it like wasn't, at least that I remember, it wasn't very common. It's more common now than it was back then for people to just, who were in this space, to say, oh, I'm going to go start a channel now, and I'm going to do my channel and do my thing. And I think it's a good thing that people have done that. But back then, I don't know if it was more hesitancy or trepidation or what it was, or people were just like, yeah, I don't want to do a YouTube channel. I just want to talk to some other people. So I put that up on the channel, and that's how it got started. And then people started watching that. And then somewhere in the timeline, the Bridges of Meaning Discord server got created. And so once people were connecting there, they were having their own conversations that they were recording, but they didn't have their own channels, and they would just reach out to me. And Rados United got a little bit of a signal boost on Paul's Twitter, where he said, oh, it's happening. You know, these people are coming together. They don't have to just talk to me anymore. I'm not the bottleneck for them. There are other people out there. I've helped you find each other. And the Discord helps you coordinate and actually have conversations with one another inside the server. But also people were like, hey, I see that Jeff and Job and some others are recording conversations, and they're putting them up on Randos United. And so they would start submitting to me their recorded conversations to put up on the channel. So it was kind of a first wave version of the Friday Morning Nameless, but without the entertainment value of what Chad brings, what Neil brings, and some of the other collaborators. You know, Chad is a creative. And so he does what he does, and he puts, wonderful, hilarious stuff out there, and also very just like neat, creative things like his poetry and the videos that he puts together. And he would say that they're low quality, but that's a part of the charm and a part of the art, I think. But Randos United, it didn't have that next level up. Like I am somewhat of a creative person, but I'm not like that creative. I'm not like I have this idea, I can put it out there and it can be fun and entertaining. Like I don't have those type things. So Randos United, I want to say, was like a first draft of what would eventually turn into certainly the Friday Morning Nameless, but then also other people like branching out there. And I don't want to credit it that much. I'm probably speaking more of my own speculation rather than what I know. But I know that Chad he's told me, he was inspired by the Randos United channel to do what he's doing now. And so I really appreciate that. And I like the fact, that he's taken that baton and run with it, simply because I don't have the time for that these days. So it's very nice that there is something out there.
I have so many questions. many questions. Okay. So
pick your best one, your top one. What's most important?
The most, there's too many. But okay, so like with just practically, people start sending you their content. Do you just put it all up? Do you have to screen it first? What's going on with all that?
So yes, that's part of the time problem. Is I would listen to every single conversation that was sent to me. So I would listen to it, not even primarily because I was worried that there was something in it that we wouldn't want to put up on the channel. I mean, that was a consideration, so I was always listening for stuff like that to see if there was, and there never was, it turned out. The other thing is, my creative outlet was creating the thumbnails and learning how to try to build thumbnails for each video. So I would listen to the entire conversation while I was trying to build a thumbnail and like putting pictures on there and things that kind of represented what I was hearing in the conversation as I was listening to it. So they're pretty junk. They're pretty ugly. I know I'm not supposed to talk about my work and the things that I do like that, but what I'm trying to do is not say, oh, and they're really amazing, you should go check them out. But that's what I was doing. So I was spending time, to answer your question. Yes, I was screening every single one, but it was a part of the process of getting it uploaded and, getting a thumbnail in place. So for some reason, having a thumbnail and kind of learning how to do that was important to me. So it was a fun learning process too. And by no means am I great at thumbnails, as evidenced by the thumbnail for this live stream. But I was having fun with it. So it was a good time.
I noticed my LinkedIn profile picture made it somehow must be on Google Images.
Yeah, mine was out there, and I have spies who found some information on you.
No.
And so that's where we got that picture. Sorry, I forgot to ask for permission to use that picture. So
Name
I'll take it.
names.
I'll take it. I'll take
Fine.
it. I'll take it down if you want. I have a council of elders within this sphere, and
Please, I'm going to need your names here.
I can't. You can't compel me to give up my sources.
Jacob Federici.
I can neither confirm nor deny that.
Okay, so I do have some more questions. As you're neither confirming nor denying. Oh no, I'm very distractible as a human being here. Okay, content, the amount of content, and then also what's it doing to you personally to be not consuming. Maybe that's not the right word. Maybe this isn't the right way to think about it, but
receiving.
As you're receiving all this stuff.
Absorbing. How about that?
Absorbing it, listening to it. Is there something going on for you? Is that affecting you going to church? Is that affecting, like, are you reaching out to these people and saying, hey, let's be friends, let's join projects? Is it just kind of a low key, just like, oh, I listened to this, it was cool, I'm going to put it up on my channel? What's going on for you there as you're listening to all of this stuff? Like, I feel like that might be draining after a while.
I mean, it was definitely taking a lot of attention. But the thing that was happening in me was just like recognizing a stark contrast between the relationships, or really the lack thereof, that I have with my local church community. And I never had, really. I always felt like disconnected, and never really felt like over the years, I've been to Bible studies in the past, and I'd even tried like a small group type thing. And before I made this connection, my wife and I had been going to a small group at my church where I was like co-leading it with this other couple. And so, we kind of got close to them, but for me, everything at church and the discussions just always feel like very surface level, because there's not a whole lot of time to interact. Or if you do go interact, it's on some kind of a project, or it's some kind of a focused like study of a particular passage from the Bible, or something else like that. And there are certain things, and we've all talked about this before, the people who came into this space from church are just like, there are just certain things that you don't feel like you can talk about, particularly in a Bible study. It's just not appropriate for something that is, sanctioned by the actual church that you're at, where it's just like, have you ever wondered if Christ really is divine, or if he's not a part of the Trinity? I've got a friend, who talks about these things, and he really seems really Christian to me, whatever that means. What do you guys think? It's just like, that is horrible. We can't entertain those thoughts. People never said anything like this to me, but there's always like that thing running in the back of your mind where it's just like, this will freak some people out if you have conversations in Bible studies, because the sole purpose of a church in those is to try to bring people like further in, and to try to help them develop, and there's a whole swath of people of where they are in their faith. And I think pastors in particular, like the ones in the churches that I've gone to, they've been like very acutely sensitive to, well, who are our new people who are just like joining the church and haven't been Christians for a very long time? Who are the quote unquote baby Christians, right? Mm-hmm. The kind of stuff that you want to talk about, Jeff, to borrow from one of Paul's epistles, is you're trying to feed them, they can only drink baby food, or they can only eat baby food, and you're trying to feed them solid food. And that's not the kind of stuff that they can handle right now. It's going to be difficult for them to process. It might not be the best thing for them. Now, I can see arguments both for and against. Well, no, we need to have those conversations, even like with the baby Christians, so that we can kind of help build them up in their faith. So there are a lot of debates about that, I guess. But yeah, it was just, okay, I've found people that I can just have these conversations with, and I don't have to worry about offending them on whether or not this is pushing somebody further away from Christ and their, attempt to bring more souls into the kingdom, so to speak. Like I don't have to worry about that. There is a sense of worry about that if you're trying to have conversations like that at church in an official, church meeting, because that's not their mission. At least the churches that I've been in, right? They're more evangelical, more, trying to lead people to Christ. And so finding this community was just like, oh my gosh, this is like a relief. This is a release valve for all of these things that I want to talk about. Like one of the things that I've thought and said somewhere on one of these channels before is, everybody in like more conservative leaning evangelical Christian atmospheres that I've been in, like they just give like this huge thumbs up to C.S. Lewis. It's just like, oh yeah, you need to read that. You need to read Mere Christianity. C.S. Lewis is really good. And so I eventually, took my path through C.S. Lewis land, and I'm like, okay, yeah, I mean, I really like Mere Christianity. That was good. It's an apologetics work, and for a time it was, I guess, helpful for me and from that perspective. But man, the more I read about him and the more I read about who his biggest spiritual influence was, George MacDonald, and I start diving into George MacDonald's work, and then I read more and more about the different things that C.S. Lewis wrote. I'm just like, you evangelical, conservative Christians, I don't think you know all the things that C.S. Lewis said, because it was years later that I picked up a book off the shelf of one of my relatives that I was visiting, one of my in-laws, by a guy named Rob Bell. I don't know if you're familiar with Rob Bell or not.
Sure.
I would presume that you are. Love Wins, right? It was like completely torched by evangelical land, right? It's just like, this is heretical. This guy has left Christianity. And so those are all the things that I ever heard for years. And I didn't have an opinion one way or the other. I wasn't really big into Rob Bell at all, really. I just kind of knew his name, and I knew Love Wins. And because I had made some friends, or at least some acquaintances, who were more like progressive leaning type Christians. I don't consider myself that, but I know a lot of people who do. And I love a lot of people who are. And so I was like, oh, well, I was visiting in-laws for the holidays, and I'm like, well, let me pick this book up off the shelf and just read it. Let me see what it's all about. And I start reading it, and there were a couple of things that got my hackles up, but it's not anything major. But as I'm reading it, I'm just like, okay, all the things he's saying here, I've seen C.S. Lewis say the exact same thing. It's just like a lot of these things, there's not really much of a difference. Now, feel free to disagree with me. I'm happy to be corrected, but that was the impression that I got as I was reading it. At that point, I had read quite a bit of C.S. Lewis, and I was like, yeah, let me run this through my C.S. Lewis filter. Yeah, I don't think C.S. Lewis would disagree with this. I don't think he'd disagree with this point. I don't think he'd disagree with this point. So like, okay, this is really interesting. So yeah, I don't know how I got off on that rabbit trail, but just being able to have conversations with people from different perspectives, both Christian and non-Christian. There were atheists that were showing up, people who were, their gateway was Peterson, and then they started watching Paul a little bit, and they're like, I'm still an atheist, but I do like being able to talk about these things. And I like how this isn't just a bunch of Christians who are just like trying to change my mind or trying to debate me or have, like the four horsemen of the apocalypse atheist types of conversations. And so there are a lot of people who started rolling into the Bridges of Meaning server that were either came from Christian backgrounds, came from Mormon backgrounds, came from Jewish backgrounds, or either still are practicing or had done some version of deconstruction, people who had made their way to orthodoxy through all of this. And they were just able to talk to each other and feel like, so to be fair to the critique that the parody people were giving of just like, oh yeah, I want to be able to talk to people and not be challenged. Well, yeah, I think that's a fair critique. There was a little bit of that, but from my perspective, it was just like, well, I want to be able to have theological discussions where I can't have them in my tradition right now because I'm going to be challenged and I'm going to be shut down before I can even just explore it for myself, right? And sometimes when you're just trying to explore or figure things out in your head, being challenged immediately on, well, that's not right, and here's why, it's just like, well, this is the same old thing that I already had, so I'm not able to even figure out what it is that I really think about this. Now, you will get people, you were at least back then getting people who were just like, no, I need to share my ideas and I need to explain to you why they're right. Come at me, bro. And we created a channel called The Forum for that. And some of our most faithful or faithful participants in the forum, it was, I nicknamed it Thunderdome because it was one of, people would be like in the general chat and start having these flame wars with each other. And as the mods, we'd be like, no, take this to the forum. And we'd send them over there, and then they could spar, right? They could have their fight with Mad Max and Master Blaster from Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. They could duke it out. And one of, as it's probably no surprise to you, one of the most faithful participants in the forum was Jacob. And so it was really good. Like, I love seeing him like spar with people, and I love hearing Jacob's ideas. And the world would be a worse place if Jacob weren't doing what he's doing the way that he does it. I know there's a lot of people who disagree with that, but that's my opinion. Come at me, bro. No, actually, no, I can't defend it, but it's what I believe. So that's it. Let's see. Your question was, yeah. So that's kind of the way that it was affecting me. Is it gave me a place. It gave me something that I didn't have before.
Okay. Can I just want to follow up on what you were just saying about the Thunderdome. I wanted to ask actually this two-parted question of like, or like I'm seeing this two parts of people who want to talk and not be challenged, and then also this people who really want to spar. But I in my brain, when you were saying people who want to talk and not be challenged, I kind of put together the story of like, well, dialogos is actually happening there, and what's the other word? Opponent processing might be able to happen more in that kind of space than in, say, just kind of people's churches or whatever, which was your comparison. I don't know. Is it happen? Can people get this opponent processing in the first place, or do they have to go into this forum?
Thunderdome. Well, Thunderdome was typically when the spirit of the conversation, like, you might be sitting, there were a lot fewer channels in the early days of Bridges of Meaning. So if you go into that server today, you're going to see like this list of infinite channels, and people get overwhelmed by it, and they're just like, I don't know how to deal with this, and so they leave. And I get that. But early on, like, anytime that you join a brand new Discord server, like if you've done it recently, you'll see there's not a lot of channels over there on the left, and people usually, get dropped into the same channel. That's how people join the server. And so, and it also says, hey, this person has just joined. And so that was the general channel in Bridges of Meaning. I think that's still how it's configured. So in the early days, you would see people come in, and then people were just like, oh, hey, I saw you on Paul's channel, or are you this person? Or how, one of the biggest questions is, hey, welcome, what brings you here, right? And so we'd start talking about how we found the space and that kind of stuff. And so the general channel would just be kind of like the welcome. It's like the foyer or the entry into the place, and people would just start talking to each other. And then there would be, just like some general conversations going on about whatever was going on. And there might be a topic that people would start bouncing back and forth off of. But then from time to time, you'd get some people who were a little more assertive with the topic or what they wanted to talk about. And, some very pointed comments are made about something that somebody else said. And so whenever it looked like things were like ratcheting up, we would also tend to notice that the other people who weren't at like maybe a 7, they were more like the average level of intensity was more like down at a 2 for any of the conversations that were happening in the general channel. And whenever they would start ratcheting up to like 7 or 8, usually between just like 2 people, we would just be like, all right, you two, take it over to the forum. And they would acquiesce. They'd be like, okay, yeah, sure, I want to go at it with this person. And they would, like bare knuckle duke it out. And one of the examples of the people who were in there pretty consistently for a time, I would say for at least a month, maybe longer, was Jacob and a guy who I don't think is that active anymore in these spaces, a guy named Charlie, who lives in Arkansas. And they would go back and forth. Charlie was a Southern Baptist youth minister who got training at Dallas Theological Seminary, lived in Arkansas, eventually became either an atheist or an agnostic somewhere in that territory. He left his job as a pastor, and then he found I can't remember his exact story. Like he's there's a video of him up where he and I have a Brando's conversation about it. And so he eventually, was making his way back to faith, and eventually came back to his belief in Christ. And I think he even went back to Southern Baptist, interestingly enough. But yeah, he and Jacob would have like tussles and back and forth, and it was so fun. And one of the beautiful things about at least that time, and I'm sure this can still happen, I don't see any reason why it couldn't, but Jacob and Charlie actually like became good friends for a time, so much so that we did have like one of the first group meetups where we all went to Arkansas and met up for what we were going to have a fishing trip. But we didn't end up fishing because Actually, Unitarian Sam was at that event. And we camped out at like a local park there, and Charlie was there, and Jacob drove all the way from California to Arkansas to come to this event with his dog Happy, and we had a fantastic time. Like I had to work that Friday because we were meeting up on Friday at the campsite. I couldn't get off work, and so I drove for probably like 5 or 6 hours, and I ended up arriving there at midnight. And they already had like a campfire going, and they were sitting around the campfire, and they were waiting on me. And I got there, and we didn't end up fishing. We just sat around the campfire and talked from midnight until 6 a.m. And that's when we finally said, all right, let's get some sleep. But like, it was just great to be able to meet in person, all these different people from this space for the first time. But yeah, the forum, I think, kind of helped forge at least the friendship between those two. And of course, the rest of us had been talking together a little bit. But the Bridges of Meaning Discord, I know you probably have questions about that. Another guy who was supposed to come to that event but couldn't is a guy who lives in Sacramento and was a part of Paul Vanderklay's original Jordan Peterson in-person meetup. Before there was Estuary, there were Jordan Peterson meetups, and Paul's was one of the first of those. A guy named Joey, who was the guy who, along with one other person I'm forgetting, I can find the email and look it up, but Joey created the Bridges of Meaning server. And so he was supposed to come out to that fishing, what ended up being the non-fishing trip, but for whatever reason, he wasn't unable to make it. And then a couple of other people who were involved. I don't know. I think you talked to Lance. I think in your first conversation, you might have been on a call with Lance.
Yes.
Yeah, Lance was nearby on a trip with his family there in Arkansas. And he came by like the next day. We had lunch. Lance came, and a lady named Shelly came, one of the first ladies in this whole space. Shelly was there. And a couple of other people that I think I'm forgetting. But yeah, so that was neat.
Okay. One woman, it sounds like.
Say that again?
One woman. I was just kind of observing. I get a lot of pushback at when I talk to people about like, oh, this is such a male-dominated space. This is just, it's all men. It's just guys being guys. You need to learn something from Jordan Peterson, whatever. And
Mandy knows Shelly. Yep, Shelly is great. Sorry, I'm gonna start highlighting comments now. There's McMo. Hey, McMo.
Mo, Mandy.
Oh yeah, Spatch. Yeah, I've got his new book on pre-order. Yep. Mandy put up a YouTube. Oh, that's your channel. Is that right?
Yeah.
Notifications. Yep.
That's me.
And a while back we had 4 watching. Yeah.
Little latte.
Hello, Little Latte. Little Latte recently subscribed to my other channel. All right, sorry. I kind of let things get hijacked because I did the thing. I looked at comments.
It takes your whole brain. It divides.
Yeah. We've got 7 people watching now, so there we go.
Oh, excellent. I forget what you said before. Hey, chat. What's up, chat?
What up, chat? Vibe check.
Okay.
There's Peter. Hello, Peter.
Tangerine guy. I'm not gonna sing the song. I was curious about if you want to talk about women, we can.
Yeah.
Why there's such a gender divide here?
I mean, my guess, one that makes sense to me is YouTube is now. I don't know why this is the case, but YouTube is highly more percentage male content absorbers, content consumers.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a much higher percentage already, and that's typically the funnel that brought everybody in to Paul and into this space. So that would be my guess as to why. There's Peter's tangerines, by the way.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, that's my guess as to why there's so few. And then also, I don't know. I just go from my wife and some of the other people's wives, just like, yeah, I'm not interested in talking about any of this stuff. I love you, but yeah, I'm glad you have other people to talk to about that. Good, go.
Okay, women just aren't interested in this.
Right.
I've got it. And then I wanted to ask you more about, as we were saying, the Bridges of Meaning server. And did you have something else about about gender that you were going to say?
No, that was it. I don't have a lot of gender opinions, and I'd like to keep it that way.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. Just kidding. But really, I don't have a lot of gender opinions, so there's not much there. We've kind of gotten to the bottom of the well.
Okay. And then bridges of meaning and how it developed and stuff.
Mhm.
So we've kind of gotten a little bit of that territory. And then I wanted to ask you too about, well, now I'm realizing in my head it was the same question, but actually it's a totally different question.
Mhm.
So if you have anything else to say about bridges of meaning and how it developed and how it sort of feeds into the YouTube.
I'm trying to think if there's anything really important that I want to highlight about Bridges of Meaning. I mean, it really was the first place for us all to meet, because
Yeah.
nobody was using Zoom or any of these, because COVID hadn't happened yet. It was right before COVID happened, maybe a couple of months before they started locking everything down with COVID. So Bridges of Meaning was important in a couple of ways. One was Paul wasn't our bottleneck anymore, because Paul started promoting the link to the Bridges of Meaning server, where he's like, look, I know it's hard to get a slot with me. If you want to have conversations with other people because you feel like there's nobody that you can talk to, there are people you can talk to now. They're out there, and go to this server. There might be a little bit of a learning curve to understand Discord, but it'll be worth it. Go find those people. So we were able to start finding each other without having to rely on Paul as our way to do it. So that's one really important thing that Bridges of Meaning did in the founding or the growth of what we would call, this community of people now. And then secondly, it was really important because with COVID locking everything down, all you really had was your family. And if all you have is your family, and sometimes you didn't even have your church at that point. A lot of churches were forced online, right? If they weren't going to defy the orders that they were given, then they stayed online. So the people who did have community at church, I wasn't one of them. I mean, I had a little bit. I knew people. I liked people there, but it was, like I said, all just like surface level. So if I wanted to have conversations about things that were like really on my mind, that I didn't feel like I could have them, either because people weren't interested or because people were just so opposed to them that they weren't even willing to entertain the conversation. And again, I don't want to give the wrong impression about the people at church that I interacted with. I just never tried. I might have been like completely surprised if I'd have tried to have conversations like these at church, to find that, there are people who want to have these conversations, and they are in my church. Interesting. But a lot of it was, well, do you have the backlog of content that you've absorbed to know about this? So that was really important at the time when COVID lockdowns first started happening, where we had a place to go, where it's just like, okay, work's over. I have spent some time with my family. My wife is tired of hearing me say, oh man, I watched this really interesting thing. Will you watch this clip with me? And she's like, I will if you want me to, but I'm sorry, I love you, but I'm not interested. Fair. Absolutely fair. So the Discord, the Discord server gave us ample opportunities to start having those conversations. And at the time, the voice chat was just that. It was only voice. There wasn't like cameras or anything like that. So you could have those conversations there. But the only way where you could have like face-to-face type stuff is you'd have to coordinate like Zoom calls, because I don't think even StreamYard, if it existed, a lot of us weren't aware of it. So there wasn't the ability to just hop on a stream and do something like this.
Okay, so there was a tech advancement that really changed things over time.
Yep.
Sorry, my dog is crying, so I might have to take a break after this question. But
sure.
I did want to ask you about not the Bridges of Meaning. I wanted to ask you about your Randos United channel, and just this kind of curiosity of like, well, it seems like maybe Mark L streams under the banner of Randos United. Is that?
Yep.
Are there other people? I just don't understand. My dog is very demanding. She could only sit still for 90 minutes, and she's crying. So I don't know.
No, that's fine. If you need to go take care of her, go ahead and do it. I'll just
give me like 30 seconds.
I can play some branding, but it's from my other channel, but that's fine. I don't care. Here we go. It's not really branding, y'all. It's nothing on the level of what Chad and Grizz do. What do I have here? Let's see. I think my mic still will stay on when I do this. Yeah, look at that. It's a trippy tunnel. Isn't that cool? Let's see. What up, chat? Let's see what's going on. Drop some stuff in the chat. Yeah, branding. There you go. Let's see what else I've got on here. I've got a guy or lady, I don't know which it is, dipping their pen into an inkwell. There you go. No inappropriate comments. There you go. Isn't that fun? I've got some mountains. Check out some mountains. Yeah, bring me some. Randos United can use some branding. If you want to do some branding, McMo, or anybody else out there, and help breathe some new life into Randos United, feel free. Feel free to send it to me. randosunited@gmail.com. Let's see. What else do I have? Here's some stuff from that I use mostly on my other channel now. It's just like some lights in the background. Oh, good. Clara's back. Here we go. Back to business.
Sorry, I had to tell my spouse, this is your dog. Deal with her.
That's okay. I'll show one more. Here's like a fairy forest. There you go. For all you George McDonald's fans, it reminds me of a scene in Lilith. There you go. All right, there. That's all the branding I have for now. Let's get back to this inspection as I'm under your microscope.
Okay. I wanted to ask you about the Randos United channel, and it seems like there's more than one person who uses it. And if you could just tell me about the state of the channel right now.
Yeah. So there was a time, I don't remember everything that was going on contextually, but there wasn't a lot that was being put up on the Randos United channel. People had kind of stopped sending conversations for various reasons. I think, sometimes it's because other channels had started, or people just didn't have any, conversations that they wanted to put up. And so Jacob reached out to me, and he said, "Hey, I've got this idea, and I wanted to see what you thought about it. I know that there's not a lot going on the Randos United channel right now. I've got this concept for like a 24-hour network where we could have like live streaming, like I'm doing. I think he had already started doing like the just chatting stuff." But he said, "I think Randos United would be a good place to do something like this. Like we need a channel to kind of host this concept." And he said, so we could have, like live streaming where people could go on there and do like just chatting stuff, or individuals could like do their own content. Like he said, think about it. His concept that he was pitching, I don't know if he said it to me this way, but it took me a while to get it, because I came back to him, and it's funny. I came back to him and I said, well, what if it was like this? And he's like, yeah, that's what I first told you. So I think once I thought it was my idea, I was more in line with it.
Of course.
That's the way it works, I guess. But he said, what if we had it where it was like this 24-hour network where people could do like live content, and whenever it wasn't live content, then we could just play like already developed content. So maybe whoever wanted to signal boost their channel, or who was willing, could share content from their channel, with us, and we could just stream that. So it's just like if you think of a 24-hour network and you have programming where it's like, okay, at this time on this channel, it's Jacob's live stream where he's just doing monologues, or it's like, it's like Luke doing his thing that he does on his channel. It would just happen on Randos United from this specific time slot,
Yeah.
And so we would need somebody to kind of coordinate and program direct. And he said, if you can do it, I think you're a really good person to do it. Like if we could set up programming and say, all right, well, this person has this time slot and this person has this time slot. And anywhere in between, we just like fill it with reruns, basically. And so he said, I don't think Paul would disagree. And I didn't think he would disagree either. I never reached out to Paul for this, I don't think. But we could just like play Paul's back catalog, would just be running on the Randos United channel all the time, right? And so that was kind of the concept. And I still didn't know the logistics of how you could make that stuff happen without me having to be there and like, you know, man the station all 24 hours. Like I didn't know enough about how you could set something like that up. And honestly, I still don't know exactly how you would do it, but it's a cool idea. Like, I would still kind of love it if that's how Randos United actually worked. I think that would be really cool. So if anybody out there who's watching knows how to do something like that, that would be cool. Okay.
Sure.
So that's a little bit of the backstory. What ended up happening was I said, yeah, because he said, hey, I've got StreamYard. That's a way for us to start doing something like this. I just need access to be able to stream to the Randos United channel. So would you work with me to give me permission to do it? And I said, yeah, sure. That's fine. And so I had no idea how to do it. I'd never worked with StreamYard before. Around the same time, YouTube was doing something like, hey, you need to come up with your own special, like unique handle that represents your YouTube presence or your Google account for YouTube or something like that. And so it's like, are you ready to do it now? And I would always keep hitting cancel and cancel and cancel whenever I saw it because I don't want to deal with it. If I don't have to deal with it and I can just get to what I need to get to, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And then around this time is when YouTube said, okay, you can't opt out anymore. You have to go in here and you have to type in something.
Yeah.
And so I did. I thought I was doing that. And I hit yes and I hit okay. And I guess I didn't read closely enough. And in doing so, I accidentally created a second Randos United channel.
I see.
And so that is the one that I ended up giving Jacob access to somehow. And he said to me, hey, I can't stream to the Randos. It's streaming to some other channel that's called Randos United. And it also created a little bit of kerfuffle within the Bridges of Meaning community because some people who had been around for a while and been watching Randos United content, when they saw Jacob showing up on Randos United and just kind of live streaming or whoever was doing it, so people started giving feedback of like, hey, this isn't cool. You shouldn't be spoofing the Randos United channel. This is not a good thing. And so I had to go clear the air. I had to be like, no. I want to let y'all know that I was a part of this and it was an accident that I created a second channel. The plan was for him to start streaming to the real Randos United channel. So that was one aspect of what happened. Okay. And so the plan was just to let whoever had access to Jacob's StreamYard account be able to stream to Randos United. And so me and Jacob talked about it a little bit, and we both said, yeah, maybe it's a better idea for Randos United to maintain its current format, which is if people have recorded channels or recorded conversations, they can just send them in and we can post them just like we've always done. And then we can use this second Randos United channel for this whole concept and this whole idea. And I was like, okay, that sounds fine to me. You know, I don't have to do any more work because I've got a lot of stuff that I have to pay attention to at home. That's fine. I'm good with it. And since then, somehow, some way, Mark and Manuel and I think Tayo even told me he could do it. They have the ability to stream to the original Randos United channel. So they figured out how to do it. I may have given them a key to the right channel somehow. And so they figured out how to do it, and that's fine. You know, they've been a part of all this from early on in the very beginning. So, you know, I know I don't have a lot of, I haven't had really any interactions, maybe just one briefly with Mark. And I've talked to Manuel a couple of times. He was actually live streaming on the channel. He's been doing a book club on Matthew Pajot's book. Completely drawing a blank on it.
I've heard of it though. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're doing like a book club series. They were like on episode 20 today or something like that. So I think I actually streamed on top of it, but we had talked about it before to make sure that we weren't overlapping each other. That's actually why I needed to change the time of our of our meeting today, because I didn't want to stream on top of their book club. So that's kind of another longish version of the story of how we ended up where we are today with now 2 different Randos United channels, even though people are streaming. Some people are streaming on the original Randos United channel, some of their content. So Mark has his own channel too. It's got more subscribers than the Randos United channel, but I think he just wants to reach as many people as possible with his content. So I don't think I have an issue with that. I mean, Mark and I have never talked about it, and so I'm not really concerned with it. It's not like Randos United has a specific, purpose that's being violated in some way. So I'm good with that. If it does end up changing for some reason, I'll talk to the two of them and whoever else has the ability to stream here and just say, hey, what do you guys think? We're looking at altering this. Do you have a need to continue using the channel, for what you're using it for today? Or are you good if we, switch things up? But as far as I'm concerned, everything's fine with it.
Okay. How are you doing on time here? I don't want to keep you hostage forever.
I'm good. And if I've been too long-winded and you need to go, feel free. One of the things that I've never done before, because I'm not used to having this huge number of 6 viewers whenever I do anything on YouTube, is to drop a link in the chat and see if anybody wants to join. But I don't want to pollute your research either. So I don't want to do that until we know we're getting closer to the end.
Before that, let me ask you. Well, I want to hear all that you have to say, and then I have this sort of questionnaire I'd like to give you, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Should we do that now?
Well, my time is the time is yours, as I've heard Paul say. So whichever direction you want to take it.
Okay. All right. I kind of cringe a little bit when Paul says that's weird. Okay. Importance of religion, 0 to 10. How important would you say religion is in your daily life?
Well, I wouldn't be a proper absorber of Jordan Peterson's content without saying it depends on what you mean by religion.
How would you define religion?
I guess it depends on what I mean by religion, doesn't it? That's really what your follow-up question was. Gosh. Well, without giving my definition of... Oh, man, that's a hard question to answer. For me, I guess you're saying for me, how important is religion? And you said on a scale of 0 to 10? 10 being most important, 0 being religion. Yeah, I'd say 10. I'd say religion is probably the most important thing in a person's world. So I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
If you want to ask feel free to ask a follow-up question to that, because I left it hanging.
Sometimes I let people leave it hanging. I mean, is there something else you need to explain for that to make sense?
Well, I guess I should give my definition of religion if I'm thinking about it with that answer. For me, religion is how you view the world and make sense of it. Mm-hmm. So whatever it is that we talked about earlier in the conversation, the stable ground that you're standing on that you don't like to have challenged, because if it breaks, everything falls apart.
The axiom.
To me, an axiom is religion. That's how I would define it. So my axioms are probably a level 10 for me as being important, because if I don't have those, I guess I feel like I don't have anything.
Okay, let me just ask a clarifying question. Like, when you're talking about your axioms, you don't necessarily mean the teachings in the church that you're a part of. You mean, things that are really just sort of your personal axioms.
Yeah, I mean, and some of those might align. Some of those might align with the teaching in my particular church. So some of them are axioms and some of them aren't.
Okay, the next question sort of carries down the same road. So if you don't want to, that's okay. But the next question is, how important is religion to the sense of who you are?
And I'll say this before I answer that question, that you might get more cooperation out of me if you put on your migraine glasses, because those are gangster. And so I feel like I have to answer.
All right.
And my wife, I'm a migraine sufferer, and so is my wife. There we go. We've got the mic too.
I didn't know I could bring this energy.
She wanted me to ask you if they work.
I don't think they work in the sense of preventing migraines. I think that they really just make you feel a lot better.
Okay.
So I noticed an improvement in just sort of quality of just how you feel. But
Okay. Well, I'll let her know. Yeah, the migraines are no joke, at least the kinds that we get. So they're no fun. Can you ask your question again? Sorry.
I had distraction. Importance of religion to I lost it. Importance of religion to the sense of who you are. 0 to 10.
I mean, I have to answer the same way as the first one with the way that I'm defining it.
Yeah.
Yeah, 10. Yeah,
Importance of religion in making decisions on family.
10.
In politics.
I think it should be a 10, but sometimes I ignore my religion in my view on politics, and I kind of have to go back to it to get me back on track. All 10s, baby. That's right, Mandy. All 10s. 10s across the board. Gold medal.
What's the board? Or something. I don't know. Not to signal, just like they do on Jeopardy or something. How often do you attend religious service?
Weekly. Yeah, either online or in person. Weekly.
Okay, and then you have some other responsibility in the church. So you.
Yeah, so the average is weekly, but then on a monthly basis, we have our board meetings. 10. I was supposed to say 10. That's what Mandy said. I attend 10 times.
Per week. That's impressive.
At least 10 times a year. I'll say that. That's where I can say 10.
Okay. And then how often do you pray? Don't say 10 anymore.
Daily. Yeah, daily.
Are you doing some kind of like free-form prayer or praying the rosary or praying some road prayers?
I mean, the one that I try to do every day at the very least is the Lord's Prayer, the Our Father, as some people call it, I guess. Yep.
Okay. How often do you read Holy Scripture?
Well, I talked with Paul about this thing that I do every day. I guess you can count it as reading, but I'm transcribing the Bible. So I do that every day. I guess I read it and then I write it down. So every day. Sometimes it's just like a verse. It depends on how much time I have that particular morning.
Like by hand? Are you doing that by hand?
Yeah. I don't have it in the room with me. I could show you the notebook.
Oh yeah, that would be really cool.
Oh wait, I do. I have some of my older ones because I fill up notebooks. I've been doing it since 2018. I want to say.
Okay.
And I'm working my way through in order, and I'm currently on the book of Ezra. Yep.
Okay.
Ezra chapter 7 or 8, I think.
Sure. Okay. How sure are you that you believe in God? 0 to 10.
10. That's one of my axioms.
How sure are you that you believe in afterlife?
Oh, that's a good one. If I can steal the definition of hope, if I can insert that for belief, I hope at a level 10 that there's an afterlife.
Okay.
Whether or not I believe that there is one, I don't know, but I have a hope that there is one.
I'll take it. I'll accept that. Let's see. Okay. You're white. You told me your age already. I mean, I'm guessing. I don't know. How would you describe your race?
Well, if it's not 23andMe, but it's one of those like hereditary.com. If that's to be trusted, yeah, I have European, like British roots. It's funny. So I have two siblings. My older brother, he's like gotten a lot into like family tree investigation and research and all that kind of stuff. So he's built he's pulled a lot of that stuff together. And he says this, but then when I went back to him and I asked him to provide the receipts, he's like, man, I've lost it since then. I can't find it. he claims that our family, in our lineage, that one of our ancestors was a jester in Henry VIII's or Henry VIII's court, I want to say. So I come from a line of at least one court jester.
That's great.
Allegedly. No, what's the phrase? Without evidence, I am claiming this. Jeff P claimed with no evidence that he's related to a court jester from Henry VIII's court. Well, I don't even know if Henry VIII had a court jester, honestly, but one of the Henrys.
That's pretty great. Let's see. I have more questions.
So I think that means white.
I'm putting white. I mean, you're currently married. So tell me about the children in your life. Are you two children? Is that right? Yeah,
they're adult now. Two of them. One of them's early 20s. One of them's late 20s. So one of them is knocking on the door of their 30s, and the other one has just gotten into their 20s. So.
Okay. And then your years of education. Tell me a little bit about your educational background.
Oh yeah, years of education, of formal education, is like 28, 29 years.
Degree, and then oh man, don't make me do the math here.
So yeah, I got an associate's degree back in 2019. I completed it after a 27-year journey. And that's my highest level of formal certified education.
Okay, that's interesting, because that's right around the time, maybe just a little bit after you were talking to Paul for the first time.
Yeah, and it was also after I had taken Jordan Peterson's self-authoring program.
Okay.
So I had done that, and then I decided, well, maybe let me see how many more credits I need to at least get a quote unquote college degree. I guess technically an associate's is a college degree. Sure. And only needed to take like 3 more courses. So I enrolled again after being out of it for probably about like 5 or 6 years. And then I got it taken care of. And yeah, I had kids at the time as I was trying to work my way through it, went through a divorce, was keeping a full-time job, all that kind of stuff. So it took a while, but I got that done.
Was there a connection between all this stuff going on? I mean, Jordan Peterson saying that, it seems like there was a connection between Jordan Peterson and the associate's degree. Am I reading that right?
I think the bigger inflection point, there is a connection, but the bigger inflection point was, or maybe impetus was, my dad, had recently passed away. My dad had passed away in 2017. So I was like, just trying to figure out, well, what happens next in my life? Like, what am I doing? Am I doing the thing in my life that I want to do, from a career standpoint, or is there something else that I want to do? Mm-hmm. I had the same problem all the way up through my 40s that I had coming out of high school, which is, I have no idea what I want to do. No clue. So if Jordan Peterson were out in my 20s, I would have fit right into that circle that was just like, oh, wow, what is this guy talking about? Oh, this is interesting. Maybe I should go chase after some of these things that he's talking about. So, reflecting on my dad's passing, just reflecting on where I was in life at that point in time, where I was in my career. And then listening to Jordan Peterson, I was like, wow, maybe I should take his self-authoring program. Let's see what this does. Let's see if this helps in any way. And that was one of the things that came out of that is, maybe I should continue with my education and see what happens. And then it was shortly after I got my associate's degree that I actually had a career change from, it's always been in the corporate world from early on. Like in my early 20s, I got an entry-level job for a corporation, and then eventually worked my way up into like management roles. And then that was all like over on kind of the business side of the corporate world. I did have some interactions with different technology departments within my various roles, but a lot of it was like me doing like corporate training, business process, like improvements, efficiencies, things like that. And after, this stage in my life where my dad passed away, I was listening to some Jordan Peterson stuff. I was listening to Paul then at that point, a whole lot more than Jordan Peterson, where I went to school, or I finished my associate's degree. It was shortly after that I did like a little bit of a career shift where I wasn't so much on the business side of things anymore. I moved into the technology side. And it was more of just like helping manage the technology process of getting software developed and delivered. And so that's what I've been doing since right around mid 2019. So it kind of helped me make that transition, which was good.
Okay, sure. And then would you consider yourself like middle class, or where would you put yourself in terms of like class and income?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the best definition would be middle class. I mean, I'm rich to a person that lives in a lot of countries outside of the United States, but aren't we all? But I guess by U.S. standards, I'm most certainly middle class. Yeah.
Okay. And then the next questions are about your religious background. I've heard a lot about this. Grew up in that pretty conservative church. Oh, your current spouse. What's her religion?
She is United. She was raised in the United Methodist Church. Yeah.
That's right. And then your first child, would you say that they're Wesleyan or something else?
Both my kids were baptized at the Wesleyan church that I still go to. I would say they would probably be, if you went on the Barna survey? If they were to fill out the Barna survey, they would say none. Like, any. That would probably, in the conversations that I have with my kids about it, that would be the category that they would most likely identify with. Yeah. Neither of them are regular church attenders. So yeah, I would say that they're in the nun category. Yeah. Religiously non-affiliated, I guess, is what that stands for.
How do you feel about that?
I mean, I feel at peace with it, because I'm of the mindset that everyone is on their own journey, and I want people to find what they need where they need it. Now, in my frame, as a Christian, that is, Jesus. But I think Jesus can come to people in different valences. And I know I'm getting into a lot of heretical territory, probably even with that statement amongst a lot of Christians that I know. But I also, I guess my North Star for this concept came to me in C.S. Lewis's The Chronicles of Narnia, the last battle, the last book in that series.
Sure.
I talk about this in my second conversation with Paul on his channel, and I actually read a blog post that I wrote like years ago about it. So if you go check out my conversation with Paul, I can drop it. I can drop it in the notes of this channel if people are interested. But Mandy's like, "What do you think? This is Grail country or something?" Look at that.
Oh yeah.
But if you don't know the story, there's a segment at the end of the book that just like really, struck me, like brought me to tears the first time that I had encountered it.
Everybody who reads C.S. Lewis cries when they read it. That is universal.
That's why I have a whole channel now that's kind of devoted to my exploration of C.S. Lewis, because I've certainly not read everything that he's written, and so that's the goal of the current project on my other channel. And I'll just put this out here while I have this larger platform for a moment, even though I could do this at any time because I can put anything on the Randoms United channel I want. If anybody has anything that they've ever read by C.S. Lewis that they like or they're interested in, I have another channel where I read through word for word everything that I could find that C.S. Lewis wrote, and I'm reading it in the order that he wrote it. But I want to invite anybody. I'll put the invite out there. We can make some time to set up some time like this where we can either we probably can't live stream it if I'm trying to go in the order that he wrote it, but we can certainly have a recorded conversation where we're reading a passage of C.S. Lewis that you like. And I will eventually get to that work on my project, and I'm either reading through it by myself, and then I can intersperse our conversation right there where we'll read whatever your favorite Lewis thing is, whether it's a passage or if we have time to cover a chapter in the time that we have that meeting. And then I'll put it onto my live stream once I reach that point in the project where we can read it and then talk about it together of, what strikes you? What do you think he means by this? What do you think this means? That kind of stuff. So I'm putting that open invite out there. You can email me either on randosunited at gmail.com, or my other channel where I'm doing this is called Shoulder Surf, SERF, not actually riding a surfboard, but surf like a lowly surf that I am. Shoulder Surf at gmail.com, either one of those if you want to reach out, or you can find me on Bridges of Meaning, Jeff P, if you have access to that server. I know some people don't. Apologies. So anyway, back to C.S. Lewis and the Chronicles of Narnia. I don't want to spoil this for you, Mandy. You say you're reading it to your girls so far, and you've teared up in every book. Hopefully you've read it before when I'm about to say this, but if you haven't read it before, you can turn down the volume because I'm going to spoil a part of the last battle. So, what was I going to say? Yes. So it's basically like the end of the world is what's happening in the last battle. It's kind of a reimagining of maybe the book of Revelation. At least part of it is kind of what's inspired what Lewis has written in the last battle. And actually, I haven't read anything on this, but this is just my sense. So I'd be interested. Hopefully I will learn more about it as we go as to what he was trying to accomplish in that particular book. But at the end of the book, the main characters who have been a part of the series for the whole time, a lot of the main characters have died, and they find themselves in the afterlife. They find themselves in the land of the main character who kind of runs the show, who is the Christ cutout of the entire Narnia story, Aslan, the lion. So they find themselves there in the afterlife, and they run into Aslan. And there's also another guy there. His name is Emeth or Emeth. I think it's pronounced Emeth if you're using a British reading of the name. Emeth. And I think the word means like truth or not purity. There's some other word for it, but I think the word means truth because Lewis referenced it in one of his letters that I'm reading from when he was like, ages 8 through 20 is where I'm at so far. And anyway, they find this character, Emeth, there in the afterlife, and they're kind of stunned that he's there. They're like, why is he there? He was actually, because there had been like this big battle that was being fought between these two nations. And this guy was a soldier who was in the opposition's camp. And he actually believed in what the book framed as like this false god called Tash, T-A-S-H. And so they're like, why is he here? He like was worshiping a completely different god, or he didn't put it in those terms, but he was like, he was not loyal to Aslan. Why is he here in Aslan's country? And the guy retells his story of when he first arrived there in the afterlife. He died at roughly the same time as these other characters. And he recounts what happened when he first got there. And he says, I met Aslan when I first got here. And I realized that I was giving my loyalty to this false god of Tash. And my loyalty this whole time belonged to Aslan. And I didn't know. Yeah, it's choking me up as I'm just thinking about it right now. He says, Aslan basically came to me and he said, everything that you were pursuing, all the goodness, all the honesty, all of the vows that you were making for vows' sake, for honor, for everything that you were doing, I put those to my account. You were following me and you didn't even realize it. And he has this conversation with him. I should just read it. I mean, it's better than I'll get it. Maybe it's better than I'll get it out right now, but it's already on another channel. You can go find it there. He basically says, but how can this be true? Do all of these, are you and that false god just the same person? And like Aslan growls and he's like, F no. He doesn't say this, but basically that. He's like, no. And he like shakes the earth. He shakes the afterlife like with his growl. It's so loud or something. That's how I remember it. And he's like, no, we are opposites. We are not the same. He says, and there are actually people who follow me that are really following him. They're not following me at all. And all the vile things and the wicked things that they do, and they claim that it's in my name. Nope, that's accounted to Tash. And so it's a beautiful scene. I would highly recommend reading it. And there are a few voices, that I've heard from like my evangelical conservative upbringing and background, where it's just like, this is heretical. I can't believe, and of all places to put this in a children's book. But that has like really formed kind of my concept and my axioms is that there's a really great section that I spend on this. I highly recommend my second conversation with Paul if you want to hear some more thoughts elucidated about this. But yeah, so I'm at peace, and I know that my kids are on their journeys, and I have faith in God that they're going to end up where they're supposed to end up on that journey. And I have hope and belief that that's a good place. Yes, Mandy is right. You have to read Lewis to understand MacDonald. Yep. So there.
Thank you for sharing that, Jeff. That's really beautiful.
Sure.
I have some hard questions on politics. Do you want to talk about politics?
I am perfectly happy to field the questions, and I might just say pass if that's okay, but we'll see. We'll see. I'll try to answer the ones that I feel like I can.
Okay, so this is going to be 0 to 10 question again. Your view on abortion. Should abortion be allowed? 0 is no, it shouldn't be allowed. 10 is yes, it should be allowed.
Ooh. Yeah, I commented on Mark Parker's live stream that he was doing a week or so ago where they were talking about this topic, and I said, oh no, this space is too brave for me. I'm gonna be a wimp and pass on that one.
Okay, the next question is gay marriage. 0 to 10, should same-sex marriage be allowed? 0 is no, 10 is yes.
Should it be allowed? When you say allowed, I should have asked this on the abortion question too. Do you mean like, should it be legal?
Yeah.
Like it shouldn't be against the law?
Yeah.
I'm going to say 10, it should be allowed. Yeah.
Okay. And then just like your political orientation here, 0 is conservative, 10 is liberal.
0 is conservative, 10 is liberal. I would say like a 4.7, something like that. I'll say 4 if you can only take whole numbers. I'll say 4.
And the other thing I didn't ask you about that I meant to, I got a few questions actually. If that's okay.
Yeah.
The first sort of question that I didn't ask you is how many hours a day do you spend on YouTube? And then the second is going to be about Discord. So I'm just trying to get an idea of how much like sort of tech time you have, how much screen time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more listen than watch, but I do watch as well. But usually I'll have like YouTube running in the background whenever I'm working. So I would say maybe average of 5 hours, 5 to 6 per day
while you're working.
Yeah.
Okay, and then just Discord, is that something that is that like
Discord? Not as much. Here recently, I haven't been spending a whole lot of time on Discord because like when you say YouTube, are you strictly talking about absorbing it, or are you talking about creating it, or is that are those two different questions?
Oh, I was kind of thinking of that all as one and the same, but I recognize it's different. Would you say it's different? How would you?
Yeah, because the time that I was spending on Discord was kind of before I got my other channel going and was, doing my content over there. And so that's kind of absorbed the available time that I have left for Discord.
Okay.
And so that's on average about an hour a day of those, 6. So it's probably like 6 to 7 hours. I would bump it up to 7 hours YouTube if you're creating the time that I'm spending, live streaming on my other channel.
Yeah. That strikes me is very different. Like I feel because and sometimes you're just reading, and sometimes you're just sort of passively taking in content. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have other like social media and stuff that's sort of screen time that way?
I have been scrolling through Twitter just because it seems to be a place where you can find out that stuff has happened pretty instantaneously.
Yeah.
It's like the fastest way to find out what's going on in the world. So I have been going there a little bit more frequently than usual. I would say maybe about 15, 10, probably 10 on the high end minutes a day.
Sure. Okay, those are kind of my tech questions. Those are my tech questions. And then I was going to ask you, just about like estuary. And I know you just recently went to, right, I saw you over in that live stream Paul did of, I'm sorry, the estuary event in Connecticut.
In Connecticut, yeah, at his sister's place. So this is the second one that he's had at his sister's place. I want to say he did the first one. It was somewhere close to COVID, but I don't know how it could have been after COVID. It must have been like right before COVID, maybe the fall before COVID. He had one of those events before estuary was a concept, where he just had like a kind of a retreat that he invited people to go up there at his sister's. And for a couple of different reasons, I wasn't able to go at the time. I probably would have. But then this was the second time around that he did it, this October. Yeah, a month ago now, roughly. So I did go to that. And what was your question about it?
I'm just trying to get a feel for like estuary, what it's like, if things have changed for you in the online space after estuary. I just kind of want to know more about it.
I mean, I've made more connections. That's probably the biggest thing. Is there's one person in particular from the estuary event that I'm having like ongoing conversations with, just to help me with a certain aspect of my life. And then it's just good to now, know people and know that they know me as well. Like Mark and I got to meet face to face. We'd interacted a little bit via email before Connecticut, but we had never talked before. So we got to meet in person. And, there were a few other people that I had only ever seen online and had never interacted with before, like Kale Zeldin was there. Mm-hmm. Neil from Chad's, partner in crime on Friday Morning Nameless. Sherry Harkins, I can't remember. Sorry, Sherry. I don't think Sherry engages with a ton of this content these days, but she was on Paul's channel quite a while back. Not Sherry Suter from Canada, but Sherry Harkins again, lives up in the Connecticut area. So I got to meet her in person for the first time. I'm not sure she had ever seen me before, but I had remembered seeing her on Paul's channel. I was like, oh wow, it's you. So that's a neat dynamic of these in-person like retreats or getaways like you had in Olympia and like we had in Connecticut, is just getting to meet the people in real life that at least one of the two people feels like they know the other person at some level. Mm-hmm. So that's a fun thing about it. And then I also got to meet a couple of new people that I had never met before. There's a guy named Daniel who lives in Rochester, New York, and he drove there from Rochester, New York, just being a lurker. That was it. he had never done anything but lurked before.
Mm-hmm.
And he decided, I think I'm going to go to this thing. And he went. And Daniel is an awesome guy. So we got to connect a little bit. And he is my loyal 6 a.m. Central US time live stream. He's there, present and accounted for almost every morning that I'm doing it. And he really enjoys C.S. Lewis as well. We both have the same favorite C.S. Lewis book, we found out, which is The Great Divorce. So that's a really good one. I can't wait until we eventually get to that one. I'm hoping that Daniel and I can have a series of conversations where we're just reading through The Great Divorce and talking about it with each other, since it's both of our favorites. So I got to meet Daniel there, got to meet a handful of other people. Michael Sartori was there, got to meet him in person for the first time. He lives down here in Texas as well. We're a ways away from each other, though. I'm in the Dallas area. He's near San Antonio. But it was just a really good vibe. And it was nice because, as you've learned from going to one of these as well, there is opportunity for you to get like personal in ways that you just don't feel like you can out here in a much more wide open setting. So people are able to get a little more vulnerable than they normally would. And there's not the constraints that I was talking about, where I've always felt like there were in church groups, where it's just like, oh my goodness, if you I don't know why I said goodness that way. Oh my goodness, if you entertain this thought, it might lead to you leaving the faith. And so we don't want to encourage those kind of conversations here, right? And to a certain extent, I get that in church. And so that's why I feel like there's a need for spaces like these, where you can say, well, I want to talk about this thing that's going on in my life that, I know in church they would say this is not a good thing. And so I need to help guide you out of it or away from it and not explore it. Again, I'm putting a lot of assumptions on how people would respond in church. But there's just opportunity for vulnerability there on topics where you would kind of feel like maybe you could share it with other people, but you don't feel like they would give you room to at least be heard and just get your thoughts out to help you work through it. So I think the parallels with like 12-step groups and 12-step programs and those types of meetings, that's kind of the space of those layouts is certainly a little bit different, because they have a rule like there's no crosstalk when somebody is sharing. So you're not supposed to like say, well, wait, what do you mean by that? Or wait, I don't understand what you're saying, or what you're saying is ridiculous. Those 12-step programs, they typically have a general outline of, don't just let people share what they need to share. And this is not about you challenging them on it. And then you can share what you need to share. And then if you want to have conversations with people about it, you can do it after the meeting. But I see estuary as kind of a blending of those two things in particular, where it's just like, share what you want to share. People can interrupt you and ask for clarity. They can even interrupt you and challenge you if they want to. This is a free-flowing conversation with when you're talking and what you're sharing. But it's got a little bit of a constraint where just kind of the spirit of the place is, I'm not trying to get into a forum type Thunderdome conversation while we're here in this circle. I could see like maybe a component that gets added to estuary is, hey, if you guys want to have this back and forth, why don't y'all go over into this other room and it's just like the two of you talking and go have that conversation. We're cool with that. We want to continue having this more group dialogue. That's just an idea that occurred to me of maybe something that can be incorporated into estuary as a part of the protocol is Thunderdome, option Thunderdome. Because these two are just dominating the conversation. Now, the role of the estuary leader, I think, is to try to put a governor on that a little bit. But maybe one of the tools that the leader could have in their toolbox is Thunderdome. Go.
I could see that.
So yeah, those are some of my estuary thoughts. I did put a video on this channel where the idea of estuary, the concept was first forming before we really when we were still locked down in COVID. And it was just this idea of, we were almost calling estuary the Bridges of Meaning server. Like things were just mixed together, where the online versus an in-life thing, there wasn't an option to have those two different things. And it was just, here's the reason why I brought this up is because I said there are my estuary thoughts. That's what the title of the video is, Estuary Thoughts, where I was sharing, here are a lot of the things that I've observed about what we get from and what happens here in the online Discord space that is Bridges of Meaning, and what that will look like once some of the COVID restrictions lessen and stop. Because there was a lot of pent up need to start to have big meetings in person, and because of COVID, it just wasn't possible. So it was all just happening online. So I was just sharing a lot of thoughts of, what I had seen, what was happening in the space at the time, and what it might look like in the future, or what it could become. And some of those things have really turned into what these estuary events are now. So I've been happy to see that that's happened.
I was going to tell you that I didn't have any more questions and whatever, but then it occurred to me that I would really like to pick your brain about something, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm your test subject, so.
Something I've been thinking about is, there's this little conflict sometimes going on in the corner, some little like sort of prickly kind of I don't really know the words, but you know what I mean? You know what I'm referring to?
Elaborate on it a little bit.
I'm just thinking of little moments when people say like, "Oh, I'm gonna leave this little corner," or things like that. And do you have any thoughts about like these kind of little conflicts that, I mean, they happen, like, there's not just even just one that we could sort of point to. There's probably several.
Do I have any thoughts about it? I mean, I've observed what you're talking about. So maybe something that'll help with this. I don't know if this is going anywhere, but or if this helps add anything. But so I mentioned Joey before. I like to refer to him as the founder. That's just the name that I give him, the founder.
I love it. Okay.
Or the creator. That's another one that I give to him, the creator. And he's not around anymore. Joey is fantastic. I wish he had the time to be more present. But at the same time, why I'm bringing him up is because his whole idea for Bridges of Meaning, and the name that he gave it, it's built into the name, Bridges of Meaning, is the whole Discord server and the space that he was trying to create was a way to help people get from one place to another place. Mm-hmm. And a bridge is a tool that you use to get there, right?
Sure.
And so I was in this place in my life and the way that I was seeing it. And this bridge is a way to help me kind of make sense of what's going on in my life and maybe make sense of the direction that I need to head. And this bridge helps me get from point A to point B. And so his intention was never my plan for people to come into Bridges of Meaning and just stay there for the rest of their lives. And I know you were asking about the corner and leaving the corner type thing, but I'm just going back to kind of the original kernels of what were the building blocks of what has become, at least the TLC community, what some of those building blocks were. It's certainly not the only one, but it was one of the big ones. And so the whole concept was, no, this is a bridge to get you from one place to another. And the hope is that you will come here, you'll find what you need in the season that you need it, and then you will leave. Not because you're upset about something, but maybe because you got everything that you needed, and the next thing that you need is someplace else. And that's the hope. That's the desire, is that's where you land. Now, does that same concept work with TLC? Like the thing that you've talked about that I've observed maybe does fall in line with that, but maybe in a different way than some of us recognize. Maybe it's just like, yeah, I got everything that I needed here. And I don't even know if this is a term anymore, but the concept of rage quitting, right? I've seen some people rage quit the Bridges of Meaning server, but maybe even more broadly, the what is referred to as the TLC, where it's just like, yeah, I'm not that anymore. I am this instead. Maybe that is still in line with kind of that general concept of this had what I needed and I got what I needed there, or this even looked like it was what I was needed, but this wasn't the bridge to get me to where I needed to go. I went as far as I could on this bridge, and I'm like, no, this bridge isn't headed to a place that I'm trying to get to. So I'm going to turn around, or I'm going to jump off the bridge. Maybe the body of water has more of what I need than even this bridge or where it was headed did. So I think a little bit of that concept of, leaving the sphere or leaving the connection is kind of tied to. But Jacob what's the right word? He left. He had been banned from the Bridges of Meaning server, or at least given a timeout at the time when Joey was the head admin. And Joey always would have conversations with the people that he got rid of or put them in timeout for a little while or ban them completely. And he would say, like, these are the reasons. Now, some people like Joey, some people don't. Jacob loves Joey. Jacob, I'm pretty sure, has met Joey in person. And Jacob had and has a great deal of respect for Joey and the way that he ran the server. Sure. There were some things that happened that I don't want to get into, not because I'm scared to get into them, but because I really think I'll get a lot of the details wrong as to what eventually led to Jacob, once he was let back into the server, eventually just leaving by voluntarily, right? Of saying, no, I'm leaving the server, I'm gone. There were several of us, me included, just like, no, don't leave, please stay. We really want you here. But he left, and he had his reasons for going, and that was the right thing for him to do at the time, and it's the right thing, for him now, I'm sure. Jacob's doing just fine. Jacob's taking care of the things that he needs to take care of, and I think he's found, more, and he continues to move towards in the direction of the things that he thinks are valuable and important, and he pushes for those things, and I love Jacob for that. There are other people who have been banned from the server because I'm on the board of admins. I'm amongst the council of elders because I was one of the very first people who was invited in to be a part of the whole thing. I don't know why. I have never banned anyone from the Bridges of Meaning server. I have the power to kick people out, but I don't have the single power to bring anyone back in. It is a board decision. So if people are trying to make the case for getting themselves back in who have been banned, or trying to plead for others to get back in, of course the board will listen to it. But there are reasons. I'll just say in general, the reasons why people are banned and are not let back in. The general reason is we either don't think it's good for the people who are in Bridges of Meaning for those people to come back, like as a whole. We don't think it's good for the overall Bridges of Meaning participants. Or we don't think that it's good for that person to be in Bridges of Meaning. And of course, that's a little bit hubristic for us to decide what we think is best for that person. It's more frequently, like 99.9% of the time, we don't think it's good for the broader group of users to have that person back in the community. Or we think it's a mixture of both. And so I don't speak for the board of mods individually. Like I only speak for the general decisions that the board has made. So everybody who is banned, that has been banned, is not being let back in, and that's a board decision. That's not like a single decision of mine, and I'm glad for that. I don't want to have to manage that on my own. That's too big of a responsibility for me personally to take on.
The board sounds a little like dystopian cave.
Yeah. It's really crazy. I'm like pulling in the same language that I use for my board of my church. Sure. But it's a similar way, much more loosely, to how the admins of the Bridges of Meaning server operate. Like, we do have a head admin, but just like a board, you have a chairman of the board, right? You have a chair of a board as well. Who Joey handed the reins over to, and I can't remember how we came to that decision. We had like a process for how we do it, and we all talked it through. I'm pulling back the curtain way more than I had intended to, so I hope I haven't violated any of the
On the board.
written rules of the Bridges of Meaning admin
12 admins.
guild.
Is it like a Supreme? I want to know. Do you have a weekly Zoom call? I mean,
No, it's much less formal than that. We have just to give you guys a little bit of behind the scenes. We have our own server. It's a Bridges of Meaning admin server, and so that's where we have our discussions and our conversations. So if something comes up, if it looks like something interesting is going on over in the Bridges of Meaning server, one of us will raise a flag and say, "Hey, you guys see what's happening? What do y'all think about this?" So there's a handful of people who have been around what you would call this little corner for a very long time that are on that that are admins of that server. So there's a bunch of people over there that I really trust a lot and trust their opinions and do a really good job, even though it might seem like even though you might disagree with certain people that are banned and why they're not allowed back in. All I can say is I think that the team of people that I work with over there are really great and really thoughtful in the decisions that they make.
How many people have been banned?
Oh man, I have no idea, honestly. I mean, at least 10. I mean, it's been around. The server's been around since 2019. Okay. I want to say so. It's been around for 5 years. There's at least 10. There's probably a lot more than that. There's people you've never heard of that get banned because they just come on there and start doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and like a clear and easy line to just get you knocked out of there is like if you're doing any kind of 4chan racist type stuff, like if it's like very obvious. And I'm sorry, 4chan, if I'm offending sensibilities. It's just the first thought that came to my mind. I probably sound too normie when I say something like that. But like if it's like obvious outside of the spirit of just like what happens in this community, right? If it's just, I don't know. I don't know the right word to put on it. But if it's like really violative of the spirit, and like we'll tend to be like, hey, we'll pull the person aside and be like, all right, what's going on? We'll try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. And we'll also try to say, hey, don't do that anymore. It's not happening here. There are plenty of places where you can go if you want to do that kind of stuff. The internet is a really big place. Go do it someplace else. That's typically the conversation that we'll have before anybody gets banned. But sometimes it's like so egregious where it's just like, nah, they're getting Thor's hammer and that's it. They're gone.
Sure. Rita, is there anything I should have asked you that I haven't asked? You're someone, since you've seen the past, I kind of want to get an idea of what your vision for the future is for the place. But so I invite your thoughts on those two questions that I asked at the same time.
Wait, I heard one of the questions, which is what's my vision for the future? What was the other question?
Just anything that I should have asked that I didn't ask.
Oh.
So there's really a lot there.
Yeah, there's a channel that I watch sometimes called Trigonometry, and that's what they ask a lot of the people that they have on, where what's the one thing that we're not talking about that we need to be? That's what that question reminded me of. Is there anything that you've asked me or that you haven't asked me that I think we should talk about? That's a good question. I'll skip to the other one first. Maybe it's the same question. So one of my visions is Thunderdome. Let's get Thunderdome into estuary as an option. All you estuary leaders out there, consider bringing that in. It might actually be fun, and people can go and watch it too, kind of in the same vein as how we were doing it with Bridges of Meaning. It's just like if you do have the physical space to have a smaller place where you can quarantine that discussion, but large enough for other people to go in and watch it if they want for entertainment. That's what happened in the forum. If you didn't like Mandy alluded to it earlier. She's like, yeah, that happens. What does she say here? Good idea. Happens in Discord too, and sometimes everyone else just leaves to another room. So yeah, instead of you having to leave to another room, you have the main culprits go to Thunderdome. Oh, a Thunderdome voice chat. That's a good idea, Mandy. We do need to. Yeah, let me talk to folks and see if we can do something like that. But we'd need a mod to be like monitoring, because we're not really often monitoring the voice chat. So yeah, but Mandy, it would be a place that you could point. Just be like, hey, can you guys take that to Thunderdome, please? So that's one for in-person estuary. What's another thing as far as a vision? Like I've talked with a couple of people, and one of the guys, Gabe, here at the local DFW estuary, about wanting to have one of the other events here in Texas. But I'm not really sure what I would want that to look like or what it would need to look like, because Paul has talked about the ARC conference that Peterson puts on, and he's been invited. He got invited to the first one, and he's invited back to the next one. But one of the things he says is, if it's just going to be speakers, I can go there and I can listen to speakers, but I can not, and I can just catch the recordings online, and I don't have to go there. It's more about me wanting to talk to the people, and if we could have like some version of an estuary going on there at ARC, that would be much better. From my perspective, we could do something like that. So for the future of it, I think what's happening now is from my perspective, it's doing just fine. People who find it and are interested in it. Mandy says 2 people voted out to the Thunderdome. That's funny. Yeah. How many votes would you need, Mandy? Would you need like a consensus? Like, have you watched those Jubilee videos where it has one person debating like multiple people from a different political perspective? I don't know if you've seen any of those, Clara, online, but they get a lot of traffic. Like, I presume that at least know who Ben Shapiro is, right?
Yes, I am aware.
Yeah, so I'll just bring this up because I think it's relevant to this point of, yeah, Mandy, those are horrible, but I can't stop watching. It's like going to watch a car crash. It's like looking at a car crash. It's my guilty pleasure. One of my kids loves watching them too, and they're like, Dad, have you seen have you seen the latest one that's come out? It's like it's our guilty pleasure to go and watch those stupid things. But anyway, that one of the formats that they have is they have one person. So a recent one, they had Ben Shapiro, and he's surrounded in this circle by like 25 Kamala Harris voters.
I was recommended this video. Okay.
Yeah. So watch it at your own peril. But the way that it works is, all of these people, are all kind of like in the same tribe or the same state of mind and the person in the middle presents assertions like, my assertion is this. Now let's sit down and talk about it. And we have like maybe 15 minutes. And so they have this stupid thing of where they all race to like get to the chair, and whoever gets there first gets to sit down and talk to the person in the middle. There have been some like crazy stuff where people have like almost collided, or people have like flipped over and started rolling. They've really got to address how to keep people from getting hurt when this happens. But anyway, they sit down in the chair, and the rule is, of the remaining people in the circle, they all have flags, and they can all like hold up a flag to say, I don't want this person talking to the person in the middle anymore. Someone else needs to get a shot of doing a better job of representing this topic or debating the person in the middle on their assertion. Mm. And so if the majority of people hold up their flags, that they pause, and that person gets ejected out of the seat, and then they have another rush to the chair. Like, they pause, they go back to their seat, and then they say, okay, 3, 2, 1, and then somebody else races for the chair. So the voting part is what that reminded me of, Mandy. And like, does it need to be a majority before you vote these 2 people into the Thunderdome, or does it just take one vote from someone else? Because you're like, I'm leaving if y'all are just going to continue to have this conversation. So go to Thunderdome. I don't know where I was going with that. So my vision, oh my gosh, like I said, I'm more of like a being pushed by the winds and the waves rather than having a vision for a direction to go. But whenever something comes to me, I do get excited about it. So maybe my Thunderdome is the vision. But yeah, I was talking about having a conference here, maybe in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. One of the things that I thought would be cool, because I was thinking about it from, you have to be able to get enough people to be able to at least break even on it. If I were independently wealthy, I would just be like, yeah, I just want to contribute money to helping have one of these conferences and bring X amount of people. And, yeah, if nobody had to pay for it, we could do something like that. And there was some way to cover everybody's travel. Like if there are independently wealthy people out there, well, that's the thing too, when you start getting money involved. But if there's like an altruistic person, I'll put this shout out there. If there's an altruistic person out there who like has billions and billions of dollars and loves what's going on with estuary and wants to contribute anonymously just to help people to get together for conferences without having to pay for it, I would love that. That would be awesome.
I think there are foundations that really would be all over this. Like I think the Louisville Institute.
Yeah.
I think the Lilly Foundation. I don't know, but
yeah. It's just I would want it to be anonymous in such a way where it's just like you don't feel beholden to anybody whatsoever, if there's a way to do that. Yeah. So short of that, ways to make it sustainable, I was just trying to think of, to get certain people. Like there's a part of me that like wants to have like people that are really well known who are interested in this. Like we still haven't had anything like this that Jordan Peterson has been at. And I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. And like a lot of me leans more in the direction it'd probably be a bad thing for somebody as big as him to come to an event like this. I don't know. I wrestle with it because early on I was like, man, it would really be cool to have an event that Jordan Peterson came to. That would be really cool, especially since a lot of the early foundational part of Bridges of Meaning was deeply tied to Peterson's work, that brought people in.
Yeah. Like and it still is.
Yeah. And so like to have him at something like that would be meaningful to a certain level. Now, there's so much of Peterson that's like has a radioactive connotation to it, where it's just like, you don't want to bring that kind of attention to it either. So I like always wrestle with it. But if we were to have one in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I think it would on some level be really neat if Peterson could either come or could be involved in some way. Maybe he just comes in on like a Zoom call or something like that and has a conversation with other people who are there at the event. But to make something like that sustainable, because I'm sure it's incredibly cost prohibitive to have someone like him there. Mm-hmm. But I was thinking, wow, wouldn't it be, again, I don't know if this is cool or not. I just remember when I first got involved, I was thinking, man, it would really be neat to get to talk to Paul. Man, it would really be neat to get to meet Paul. Mm-hmm. Wow, it would really be neat to get to hang out with Paul. So I got to do all three of those things, right? With eventually this Connecticut event. I did go hang out with Paul. I went to visit him in Sacramento when I was in vacation in San Francisco a year or so ago. So that was cool. And my wife and I got to have lunch with him and Joey, and that was nice. Mm-hmm. But yeah, just this idea of getting to go and hang out with the people that you feel like you already have some kind of connection with through the fourth wall, right? Yeah. They don't have a connection with you because they've never talked to you or met you before. Mm-hmm. But it's neat to be able to go out and spend some time with them. And this is probably a horrible idea, but I'll throw it out there. Like, what if you could have your event or your conference or whatever it is in a place where there's also a ton of different like activities that you could do. Like the Dallas-Fort Worth area has like tons of like different activities for entertainment and just recreation and stuff like that. We have a lot of cool parks. We have amusement parks. We have parks where you can go hiking, go walking in. We have all different kinds of things. Like there are places where you can go ride go-karts. There are, places where you can go bowling. I know that these places are in other areas too. But what I thought would be really cool, especially if you're like a lurker, but you feel like, man, I really want to hang out with this person or spend some more time with them, is you could pay to go you could come to the event, but then you could also pay like some kind of a premium to go say, oh, I want to go do on a miniature golf event with, a handful of other people, like a group of other people who want to do this. Okay. But it's me and maybe 5 other people who are going to do miniature golf with Jonathan Pajot, or it's the whole paintball with Jesus kind of activity, but it's just like you can pay a little bit extra if you want to go-karting with Paul Vanderklee. or I just thought of this one. Like they have like these retro arcade places now, where it's just like, well, I want to go with a group of people from the corner where it's coordinated, but it's also one of these micro celebrities is guaranteed to be there, and I could spend my time, and we're doing that. We're hanging out, we're eating pizza like the good old days, and we're playing our video games together. So anyway, that was just an idea that I'll put out there into the world. And people can say, oh, yeah, that's fraught with all kinds of problems. Or they could be like, no, that might actually be really cool. Maybe we could piece something like that together. Maybe you go on a hike with John Vervaeke, you and like 5 or 6 or 7 other people. And, that will help pay for actually getting those people to come.
Sure.
So anyway, it's just an idea.
That's great ideas here. No bad ideas in brainstorming. Well, I really feel like I've gotten so much out of our conversation, like just understanding so much more, just a much clearer picture of bridges of meaning, of the Discord, and then also your own channels and your own walk. So I really appreciate all that. I feel all the richer for this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thank you for. I reached out to you because I want to say it was on Grim Grizz's channel, where he had a video up of Nolan's Through the Fire book, and he was handing out some copies of that book at Nate's barbecue at Nate's house, right?
Yeah.
And that was where I first saw you, because I hadn't been paying as much attention. I had like scaled back a little bit as far as my attention was concerned to everything that was going out there. So that was the first time I saw you. And I saw Afriel like standing there next to you. And I'm just like, I am so out of touch because I didn't know who you were. I was like, who is that? And then I didn't know who Afriel was either. I of course knew Grim, and I knew a couple of people, like I knew, some of the people that he was handing the books out to. And so where was I going with all of this? Yeah. So you had mentioned, hey, reach out to me. So I was like, maybe I should, once I knew more about who you were, I was like, oh, I should reach out to Clara. And especially since she's studying everything that's going on here, maybe I could be helpful with kind of how everything got started. So, I mean, I don't feel like we've even kind of scratched the surface behind a lot of those things. Like there are so many rabbit trails that you can go down. And so on the question of the things that we're not talking about, I mean, I think we've touched on some of the key items, but just a thing that is near and dear to my heart are just some of like the early relationships, that formed to kind of help get this space to where it is today. People met in this space and got married and now there are new humans on the planet because of them meeting in this space. So that's really neat. Excuse me. I don't think that Job necessarily would have kids today had he not come into this space. Now, he was already married when he came here, but I think just the idea of, I may be speaking out of my depth with Job, and I don't think that Job will necessarily even see this. But yeah, if I'm remembering my history right, I don't think children were anywhere on his or his wife's radar before he started when he was going through his journey and transformed by his involvement in this space, and he's not as involved now as he was anymore, but he was a foundational piece for a lot of people to even get involved in the first wave because everybody connected so much with his story. You were winding things down. I did want to ask you how much longer you can stay. I could probably stay for about 15 or 20 more minutes. I'm really excited. We've got about 7 people watching. I can drop a link if anybody wants to come in here and say anything else, unless you've got to run.
15 or 20 more minutes is great. I just wanted to say, I connect to the fact that we were just scratching the surface. And so we might need to check back in January and see if we can to get a little deeper. I don't even know. But no, you've been so helpful in just that email. That email, you sent it to me and I was like, this is what I needed. This whole I was thinking, I wish I'd reached out to Jeff first.
Well, that's okay, because I hadn't, I've been back in the shadows, or I was for a little while. So I don't see any reason why you would have even known who I was or thought to reach out to me. So it's good.
Did I see that maybe you had gotten COVID or something, and so you were online like a little bit more for like a week, like maybe a few months ago? Was that you?
I did have COVID, and Chad was doing a live stream on a Friday night, and so I was quarantined up in my bedroom, and I was just like, well, I'll just hop on and talk to Chad for a couple minutes. So I was recovering from COVID. I hopped onto his stream. Christian Baxter hopped on, so I got to talk to him for a little bit, and then a week or so after that, Chad had invited me to be on one of his Not Estuary shows. So that was me kind of dipping my toe back in. And then I got into the Bridges of Meaning server voice chats for probably about a month. And then I've scaled back from that a little bit, but yeah. So yeah, it's no shock to me that, and yeah, there's no reason why you should have reached out to me early on.
No, but like I had kind of heard like just little like, I think I knew of you just a tiny bit, but
Okay.
yeah. But then I saw you coming in during your quarantine, and I was like, oh, that's Jeff. That's Jeff.
That's the guy. I don't know. Let's see. What else was I going to say? I did want to ask you a question. Like I said, all I have is an associate's degree, so I don't really know how PhD stuff works. I know you obviously have to have a bachelor's before you can go get a master's, and then you have to have a master's before you can go for a doctorate. Is that accurate?
No. In fact, I did it the wrong way because I did it that way. But actually, a lot of doctoral programs have a master's built in, so you can sort of do get your master's on your way to your PhD.
Oh, okay. But you do have to have a bachelor's to get your master's. Is that accurate?
I would say that that's accurate in practice. I don't know if there's any sort of rule that says you have to do that, but in practice, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I thought so. Or I had assumed that. What else? I wanted to ask you about like the research on this project, and how like from a researcher's perspective, again, you'll see the depths of my knowledge about any of this as I continue to open my mouth. But my question is to try to help me get to my question. So I think about experiments just in general, like scientific experiments, and you're trying, like, for the thing that you're trying to study, you're trying to control certain variables, where it's just like, I need to keep these variables out and focus on this particular piece so that I can see what thing modifies the results and what things don't, right?
Sure.
I want to try to, and I'm probably not using the term in the right way, but the control versus the something else. I can't think of what it is.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious, like, from your research standpoint, like, this isn't really an experiment. This is more research. And so, like, is there any kind of pollutant or anything like that with, like, you immersing yourself and being involved in it?
Mm-hmm.
From a research perspective, is there like anything that that you would consider, or that anybody would consider, that's like looking at your research work and say, well, wouldn't it be better if you were like studying this and not being involved in it? I'm not making that case, by the way. I'm just saying, does anybody look at it that way, or the way that you're setting up your research and what you're working on for, is it called your dissertation when it comes to a doctorate? To where you're doing something like that is, I wouldn't say breaching or in violation, but it's just like, are there different ways to go about it? And the way that you're doing it, it's like perfectly fine because that's the way that you're going about it. But is there also an alternate path that one might have gone down, that you might have gone down, to say, no, I'm doing it in such a way where I'm not embedding in it. I'm just going to people and asking questions, and that's how I'm doing my research.
Sure. That's a really important question. Like, thinking about like research methodology. So I'm using a method called ethnography, and I'm kind of using this internet ethnography method. That's just a method, just sort of the way I'm doing it, sort of following these rules and principles that have been established. And so part of that is participant observation, which is just what you're saying. I'm sort of embedding myself into the process, sort of learning how the process happens by kind of going through it myself in some ways. And to me, that answers processual questions about process in a way that you just really absolutely couldn't in any other way. So it's like, so there's no way I could possibly understand everything that happens here, but I'm understanding a particular aspect because I'm embedded in it. So I have to sort of figure out, well, how does Discord work? How do people communicate on Discord? How does this work in people's regular lives? And maybe, my thinking is I understand that a lot better as somebody who's also doing it, sort of getting to build these relationships. I've really enjoyed sort of meeting people who I consider, to be friends in this space. And like, that's also part of my, it is a tricky balance. I don't know if that makes sense. Like it's a tricky balance because it's like, yeah, I have to sort of, I am going to write a book about this. I don't want people to sort of feel like I'm, sorry, I feel like I'm giving you a lecture here.
No, it's good.
I don't want people to feel like I'm like taking advantage of them and like hearing their like stories and stuff without like under like the guise of friendship. I just feel like it's kind of been like a natural outcome that I've gotten to like make friends here. And then also at the same time, understand a lot more about what's happening here so that I can write like a pretty well-informed dissertation and work from that. And I don't know if I lost the plot of your question there. I'm trying to think, did I answer some of your question? So there are other ways to go about this. Like there's a lot of survey data. The problem with the survey data, and I kind of gave you one of the surveys here, this sort of faith matters survey. What is the importance of religion? What is religious practice like in your life? What is your religious tradition? What are your demographics? Like we can ask these questions till we're blue in the face, but most people say, well, actually, I don't fit exactly here or there.
Yeah.
And I feel like, this question or hearing you talk about it is so deeply informative of like, well, this is a human condition. Like we're not going to fit in a box. And if we say we do, we're just getting bad data. So I would say having this conversation with you tells me so much more about the sociology of religion in the United States right now than does.
Did you get a half scoop?
I haven't fed her.
Okay.
Oh wait, I did. I gave her half scoop.
Ah, okay.
Sorry,
No,
the dog.
Yeah, I have a cat right here that's eventually going to need to. Well, it'll be a while. It's not her dinner time yet, but I understand. I understand the half a scoop, the 2 scoops, the 1 scoop.
Yeah, she's getting old and cranky.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so yeah, I could probably go for about 10 more minutes if that's good with you. If people in the chat want to join, I'm going to drop a link. I saw a serial killer earlier in the comments. Of course, Ron's been here for a while. I see William. William is not going to come on. He only goes on to on-ramp radio, audio only. I see Peter. I see Mandy. So we'll see. I'll drop a link here for anybody who wants to join us for a few minutes here to give us feedback or to survey us.
Survey us, yeah. That's what people tell me. PPK was saying the other day that he's studying me.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, he studies everybody though. That's his secret. He just sits there and listens and takes everything in. And
he's writing a book that he didn't tell us about.
That's his food. He's going to write a book someday. It's when he's no longer a full-time pastor. I'm sure of it.
Jeff, I think, yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, like, you were saying that, like, you don't have a PhD or whatever, but I feel like you know a lot more about a lot of things than a lot of people with PhDs. So,
yeah,
I'm just saying.
Well, it is one of my. I do have an inferiority complex about how degreed or lack of degreed that I am. So, there's always a part of me that's just like, man, I really do need to finish my bachelor's because I can't get a master's without a bachelor's. So. But none of it is about, well, what do I need what would I do with my, like, if the first question is, what do I need a bachelor's for? If the answer to that is, well, you can't get a master's without it. And then my question is, okay, fine. What do you need a master's for? Oh, I don't know. I know that there are things out there in the world that I need to learn that will help make me more credible so that I can do, okay, well, what is it that you want to do? well, maybe there's a certain job, that I want to try out there in my industry that I haven't done yet, or maybe there's another level of management that I want to advance to. Maybe I want to go work on the C-level, of the various companies that I've worked for. Well, maybe I have to be degreed to do something like that. And some of the people that I'm talking to who live and work in those spaces, they're like, no, you're okay. If there are any questions where you feel like you have gaps on or soft spots, we'll talk about those. But no, you're all right. So yeah, I mean, would I feel like it was filling some kind of hole for me to say, oh yeah, I have a bachelor's and it's in this and it's from this particular quote unquote prestigious university? Sure. Hey, Rod's in the chat. Hey, Rod. Rod's been on Paul's channel. I'm sure you've seen Rod before. Yeah, anybody who wants to join, I've dropped a link. If you don't, that's fine too. We can end. What did that say? Clara is special. Jeff P seems a real person. Thank you, William. I'll take that as a compliment. Clara is special. Yeah.
Special.
That's a compliment too.
In my growing up, we kind of use that, unfortunately.
It's derogatory. He's special. That's a good question, Ron. What do I want to master? I actually want to master myself. I want to master my reactions and my emotions, and I'm not sure that there's a degree that I can get in that. So that's a good point.
What about this Peterson Academy stuff? Are you thinking of doing that, or? I
mean, I've looked at it. It looked interesting, but at the same time, I had looked at Masterclass before that, and I was like, well, that looks interesting too, but what am I going to do with it, right? Peterson Academy, I think his aim is to credential you, and I think I just saw something that with the new administration that's coming in next year for the U.S., they want to put together like an online academy, and I'm just like, and the concept is, well, you would be credentialed for government jobs. But so anyway, the point is, like, I'm not trying to start a whole conversation on that specific topic. It just reminded me of Peterson Academy as well, where I think Peterson Academy is more robust than what it sounded like they're presenting in the government, the Trump administration. But the Peterson Academy thing is just like, yeah, and we want to help you get credentialed so that, organization, and we want to partner with hiring organizations out there to say, hey, here's what you're getting, and this is the kind of person that you're looking for. Mm-hmm. And that's all well and good. And I was reminded not too long ago in a conversation of, Jeff, when you present as already having all of the credentials that you need. So I don't think you really need to worry about that. You just need to learn how to tell your story in a way that where you don't feel inferior about it, but it's more like something that superior is the wrong word, but make it a story that you can basically brag about and be proud of how you got to where you are today. And that, your education is actually in the field. It's not, it's not 2 years or 4 years or 8 years or 10 years of, academic studies. It's like real world studies of the business world and all of the different things that you've been through and the different things that you've done. So I think that's a very valuable bit of advice, that I can work with, but it's the part of continuing to master myself. So I can be, like, people say this and it's hard for me to latch on to just hearing it, where they talk about it in like 12-step groups, and they also talk about it in church. These are the key places, but you also hear it out in like the quote unquote secular world. Thank you, Mark. Mark, you do the same. I don't know if you saw Mark's comment.
Yes. You bring it.
I'm trying to bring the kavod, not the commode, the kavod. But people, they will say, hey, the most meaning and the most joy that you will get in life is in serving others. And that's really hard to hear in like a church context where you particularly grow up in like a conservative Christian community. It's like, come to Jesus, pray the sinner's prayer, and now start showing up. Anything, what is Rod saying? I'll get to my point. In the business world, anything beyond a bachelor's generally makes the employee less valuable. Interesting. Interesting. I'm sure that's not the same in academia, Clara. I bet the higher your degree, the more valuable it probably makes you in the academic world.
Okay, so it depends on how you think about value, because you're actually lost to your company if you can do your job with a bachelor's, but they have to pay you as a master's. I don't
Interesting.
know if that's what Rod's saying. But I didn't want to get this. We can talk about education all day long, and I would say that most of the hard work of education is stuff that you don't necessarily do on your way to getting a degree, like reading difficult texts and working through them. How many undergrads have gotten a B on a paper just because they didn't bother to read it, but they had to get passed, whereas if you are doing that hard work on your own, you're getting much more of an education than you are if you're an undergrad, a lazy undergrad.
Here's Rod clarifying his comment. So they won't get less salary. They're just generally less useful. That's
they got too many of their own ideas.
Yeah. So what I was saying is you hear a lot, hey, you'll get the most meaning out of serving others, right? But then whenever I think about that in like a church context, so that means come volunteer for this ministry, come do this thing and do that thing. So I've kind of found it hard to make that connect for me, like in a church atmosphere, but like in the business world, in my business interactions and all the different tasks and projects that I've worked for or worked on, the things that I find most fulfilling is when I can help people learn how to do the things that like I've learned how to do, like the useful things. Like one of the things that I love doing is learning how to solve a particular problem, to solve something. And a lot of times it's my own like problem that I'm trying to solve, where it's just like, this thing is in my way. It's keeping me from attaining a goal. How do I solve it? How do I figure it out? And one of my favorite things is once I don't necessarily enjoy the hard part of figuring out the problem, but once I get to the other side and I've solved the problem and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is it. I've solved it. The other thing that I love then is showing other people how to do it, like how to solve that problem. Like, so that's one of the most fulfilling ways that I've found to like serve others, is just like, oh no, this thing that you're trying to do, let me show you some of the things that I've learned to like help you, and take it or leave it. But this was really helpful to me when I figured it out. And so, a lot of the leaders in my organization saw that in me very early on. And so they stuck me like in the training department. And they were like, oh we need to stick this guy over here. And so I just absolutely love that, because, I joined my company at an entry-level call center position. And it was like fate. I don't know if I've ever told this story in this sphere before. But about 6 months into my job, I got some kind of like head cold. And this was years ago now. This is like the mid 90s. I got like a head cold where I lost my voice. And so I don't know if you know this or not, but if you're a call center agent and you can't speak, you can't do your job. Right. Yeah. So I had lost my voice so much so that like you could barely make out what I was saying. And so I was at home. I was a morning shift. And so you're supposed to call in. And that was actually, there was no such thing as email. The only way you could communicate with work, at least at that time, email was around, but it wasn't ubiquitous, right? So I had to call in, and I called the supervisor on duty, and I started talking into the phone saying, hey, I feel fine, but my voice is not working, right? So do you still want me to come in? And I said that, and they said, hello, and then they hung up because they couldn't hear me. So I called back again, and I said, please don't hang up. It's me. I was like yelling as loud as I could, and it was coming out like, hello, can you hear me? It was coming out like that. And so finally she heard me, and she, kept getting me to repeat myself so she could actually make out who this was. And I said, do you still want me to come in? And she's like, yes, still go ahead and come in, and we'll go from there. So I did. I went in. They told me to log in. I got on the phone. After 3 or 4 calls in a row of customers hanging up because they didn't think anybody answered the phone, they pulled me off the call, And they said, hey, we've actually got a crop of new hires coming out onto the floor to take their calls for the first time, their first live calls today. We're going to have them all grouped together in this little pod.
Sure.
We want you to go over there and we want you to help them navigate the system. They've already been trained on how to use the system, but once they're under fire and they've got a person coming in their ear with all kinds of, stress, just help direct them to the next screen that they need to click on, where they need to enter information. And here, take this notepad with you. You can write on it and you can stick it on their screen to tell them, just give them some basic cues and stuff to do. And so that was how my career in corporate training started.
Lucky.
Yeah. And so it was fate. It was kismet.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that's what led to my career of eventually becoming the person that was over the call center. So I became the operations director of our, I don't know how many 100-seat people that we had. And it was across, we had one in the US, we had one in Canada, and then we eventually got one in South Africa. And that was towards the end of my career there. But yeah, that's led to everything in my business career. But it was that thing of being able to help people who that hadn't quite got to where I was on the journey yet, and being able to go back to them with an acute problem that they were trying to solve. Their problem was, how do I survive the next 8 hours on the phone? I just came out of training and simulation, and I have not been talking to real life customers. And now I'm talking to one, and I'm kind of flying solo, and, just being able to say, everything's okay. I'm going to help you through this. You're going to do great. You're going to be better than I am by the time you're done with this, things like that. That's what I really found that I loved doing. And so that was fun. That was one of the things that I found where it finally connected for me of the serving others idea and how you can get a lot of meaning out of that. So nobody wants to join us. I guess they don't like us. Don't know what it is, but I'm out of time anyway, so sorry, y'all.
I really appreciate it, Jeff. I'll follow up with an email. Thank you so much for enriching us with your story. It's been so wonderful.
Yeah, well, thank you for listening, and I appreciate everybody coming on. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do some shameless self-promotion with my. Actually, I don't have the link. I'm gonna grab the link to my YouTube channel for my C.S. Lewis project. And this is, okay, I'm going to put it out there like this. Even if you're not interested in C.S. Lewis, I completely understand, right? I'm too interested in C.S. Lewis. But if you know people who are interested in C.S. Lewis, that's the purpose of my channel, is I'm learning about him through what he wrote. And I'm also inviting people who, if there's certain things that they like, and I've already said this once on this stream, but I'll say it again. If you know anybody that's like that, it's oh, this person likes this particular book in C.S. Lewis. And if they want to come on and read it, read passages of it with me, you can pass it along to them. So give me a second. I'm going to go find the channel link, and I'll drop it here in the comments. Where'd it go?
I thought shoulder surf was an interesting name.
Yeah, that's the question you didn't ask me that you should have asked me.
Yes, tell me about shoulder surf.
Give me 1 second, and I will. Oh, the reason why I can't find it is because I'm logged in as that channel. Let's close that. Here is the channel, and I need to flip over and drop it into the comments. Yeah, here's my channel. My other channel, like and subscribe. I live stream most of the time every day at 6 a.m. Central Time. Right there. There it is for you. It's more for me than it is for anybody else, so I don't expect you'll be entertained by it, but maybe you will. I have a robot AI co-host on that channel who I read aloud and I say, hey, robot lady, what do you think this means? And sometimes I don't even have to ask her. She'll just jump in and interrupt me and start saying, oh, it's very interesting how C.S. Lewis thinks this or does that. It's pretty dystopian. But anyway, I would much prefer to have real life co-hosts with me, but I understand that 6 a.m. and C.S. Lewis is not as interesting. Thank you, Rod. Thank you for adding to the subscription count. Oh, shoulder surf. Yeah, so like I mentioned with Randos United, and we'll end on this, I created the channel kind of with like a germ of an idea, but I never carried it out. Never knew what I wanted to do. It's called Shoulder Surf, Ron, like a shoulder, and then surf, but not SURF, like the actual act of surfing, but surf, SERF, like kind of a commoner in a feudal system. And so I created that channel as well because I was like, I don't want to use Randos United for my individual content because I don't really have any. I don't think that I have anything. I felt like Randos United was more of a communal space anyway, so I didn't want to violate that. So that was kind of my original ethos for Randos United, and what kept me from just going up here and saying, "Oh, I'm just going to start using this platform where everybody was just kind of subscribed and watching content to see what everybody, what conversations people were having that they wanted to share." And so I said, all right, well, if I am going to do my own channel, I don't even have any idea what I would do it on. Maybe it would just be me streaming the kind of things that I look at on the internet, and I'm just like jumping around, or here's my learning process, and here's what I'm learning about today, something like that. And so I could still use the channel for that. But then I had a randos conversation on Chad's channel back in the summer. And he said, he just made an offhand comment of like, yeah, people are starting their own channels, and I think that's the way it should be. And I think Randos United should be a common space for where people do group stuff instead of just single. And he said, and you should do C.S. Lewis stuff on a channel. And I was like, yeah, I should. I have had this project where I wanted to read everything that he wrote, and it's been sitting on the shelf for like 5 years. I've never done anything with it. So I had built this channel for like individual content, but I had no idea what I was going to do. So I never did anything on it. And that's been laying around for like 4 or 5 years now too. And so I just fired it up about a month or a month and a half ago. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to read everything that C.S. Lewis wrote in the order that he wrote it. The plan that I had always had, just to do it on my own, but to hold myself accountable or force myself into it, I'm just going to get into the habit of live streaming this practice at the time of day where I have the time. So it's 6 a.m. But like I said, I am going to start reaching out to some people that I know do like C.S. Lewis. Like there's a pastor that I really like who's out in California that I've connected with before. He's a huge C.S. Lewis fan. He's the father of the band members of Switchfoot, if you've heard of that band before.
Heard of Switchfoot? Yeah,
their dad is a pastor. His name is Mark Foreman. He's great. He's semi-retired now. He works about quarter time, so he'll deliver. He was the lead pastor, but he delivers a sermon like maybe once every 3 months now at a church out in California. He's really great. I want to reach out to him at some point and say, hey, would you like to join me for an episode of like reading any C.S. Lewis that you want to read, and we can read it together and talk about it. So I've got him on my list. I've got Richard Rowland on my list that I want to reach out to because I know he's a big, Tolkien and C.S. Lewis guy. I put it out there whenever I was in Connecticut. I know Cale Zeldin is into C.S. Lewis, so I'll probably try to tap him at some point. But yeah, it's not just high status people. It's really any and everyone. And then, sorry, you said the name. Yes, Rod is keeping me on task. The name. So the idea is, you've heard of the phrase standing on the shoulders of giants, right? And I've also always heard this phrase like shoulder surfing. Maybe it's in some of my social engineering security training type stuff that we have to go through in the corporate world. Like in a negative connotation, shoulder surfing is like looking over somebody's shoulder when they don't know that you're watching, and you're like stealing passwords or you're getting access to privileged information. And so I'm kind of mixing the standing on the shoulder of giants metaphor, because this isn't necessarily just limited to C.S. Lewis. This will also, like, if I get down the road far enough, it'll come into play with like other people. Like maybe I'll do this with George MacDonald too, or I'll do this with some other people that I find like kind of influential in my thinking or kind of helping build my axioms. Like I see this as what Paul is doing on his channel. People might bristle at saying, Jordan Peterson is a shoulder of a giant that you can stand on, maybe, but in a certain extent, that's what he's doing. But when I think of standing on the shoulder of a giant, it's like, well, you are now contributing to work that they've already established. Now, I don't look at myself as that. So I look at myself as more in like a surf position. Like I'm not a king level position. So it kind of has a dual connotation of a serf who is looking over the shoulder of a giant. And here, in actuality, I am shoulder surfing in reading C.S. Lewis's mail. Like I'm reading things that he wrote that he never intended to have other people read, right? He was writing to his family or to his friends at the time. And it's just like, no, I didn't realize that this was going to go out into the world on the internet before he ever knew of the concept of the internet. So I'm kind of shoulder surfing by sneaking in and looking at things that people wrote that they didn't mean to. But of course, the published work works as well. That obviously went out into the world. So I don't even know. The phrase doesn't even fully make sense in my mind. It just kind of came to me and I was like, all right, I'll use that one. That's what it is.
It's really cool. A lot. You're gonna have to, once you get to the really fun stuff, you know, like the really fun, exciting C.S. Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I always break down from my theological reading and decide, oh, I'm just gonna read, you know, Chronicles.
Yeah.
That's when you come get me.
Okay. Well, yeah. If there's any, you just let me know, especially if there's like a favorite part or there's something that you come across where it's just like, oh, I want to read this part with Jeff, but don't come to read it with me thinking that I'll have any great insights. I am hoping that it will be helpful since I'm reading all of his letters, that I'm getting to know him a little bit better. Mm-hmm. And I could say, oh, this reminds me of something that he wrote whenever he was, you know, convalescing in the hospital from his World War I injury. And this particular thing was going on in his life. This might be tapping back into that. So anyway, yeah, Ron, I see you say Tolkien there. I'm not familiar enough with Tolkien. Man, that's a hard one to get into, though. Not because he's not good. Like I've read, I think the only thing that I've read of his, not even read, but a la Chad listened to, is the first two of the 3 Lord of the Rings books. But yeah, I'm way over time. I've kept you longer than you said, Clara. So thank you. And we should have another conversation where we can turn it around. I know you've answered a bunch of people's questions too, but I think I'd like to have you back on the channel to do a quote unquote rando style conversation where maybe I can ask you some questions that you haven't been asked before, if you're willing to subject yourself to that level of scrutiny.
We'll talk more in January, Jeff. We'll talk more.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you, Clara. Thanks everyone for joining. And I will end the stream here. I'll end it with some branding. What kind of branding can I end this with? Take care, Clara. I'll end it with a commercial for Shoulder Surf. How about that?